Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into a world lit only by fire and moonlight. Imagine the scent of damp earth and wood smoke clinging to the air, the feel of rough wool against your skin. You are in medieval England, a time of grand castles and chivalrous knights. At least, that's what the storybooks say. But beneath the polished armor and embroidered banners lies a far more complicated and often unsettling human reality. We're going to be exploring some of the monarchs from this era whose reigns were, let's say, less than saintly. It's a journey into the shadows of the throne room, where power, paranoia, and personal vice twisted the course of history. You probably won't survive this if you were actually there, given the questionable sanitation and even more questionable justice system. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It lets the algorithm know that stories about dysfunctional royalty are in fact a valid form of late-night entertainment. And while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where in the world our little historical explorations are reaching. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing on the edge of a vast, misty meadow. The grass is long and damp, soaking through the thin leather of your shoes. This is Runnymede, a name that will echo for centuries, though right now it's just a stretch of neutral ground. Across the field you see a collection of ornate tents, their silks fluttering in the breeze. These belong to the barons of England, the most powerful men in the kingdom. They are clad in mail and grim expressions, their patience worn as thin as a well-used coin. In the other direction stands a solitary grand pavilion, richly decorated in royal red and gold. This is the temporary court of your king, a man named John. John was never meant to be king. The fourth son of the legendary Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine, he was nicknamed Lackland, because, unlike his elder brothers, he wasn't expected to inherit any significant territory. The name stuck, and it seemed to define him and the rank, creating a deep-seated insecurity that would curdle into cruelty and suspicion throughout his reign. You watch as he emerges from his tent. He is not the towering figure of myth. He's of average height, fleshy, and dressed in finery that seems to be trying just a little too hard to project an image of effortless power. His eyes dart back and forth, constantly scanning the faces of those around him, seeking not loyalty, but the faintest glimmer of dissent. His reputation precedes him. In villages and taverns, they whisper stories of his character. They speak of his insatiable greed, a financial rapaciousness that went far beyond the normal expectations of medieval taxation. John didn't just tax his people, he financially bled them dry with a kind of predatory genius. He used the levers of justice as personal cash registers, imposing arbitrary and crushing fines for made-up offenses. A baron might find himself fined an astronomical sum for the privilege of marrying a certain heiress, or even for simply being late to a royal summons. It was less a system of governance and more a kingdom-wide shakedown. He kept meticulous records of it all, a man obsessed with the numbers, documenting every penny he squeezed from his subjects. A real spreadsheet fanatic, born centuries too soon, but the whispers go deeper than just money. They speak of his lechery, his complete disregard for the sanctity and honor of his noble families. Knights going off to fight his wars in France would return to find their wives or daughters had received unwelcome royal attention. The price of refusal was often a trumped-up charge of treason, landing the unfortunate husband in a dungeon until an exorbitant pardon could be paid. It was a cruel and effective way of asserting dominance, a deeply personal violation that shattered the core tenets of chivalry. The barons held so dear. This wasn't just poor leadership, it was a profound insult to their very identity. Interestingly, for a man so morally unclean, he was surprisingly fastidious about his personal hygiene. While the stereotype of the unwashed medieval peasant and lord holds a good deal of truth, King John was an exception. You might even notice as he passes by that he doesn't carry the usual medieval aroma of sweat, smoke, and stale wine. He smells faintly of herbs. Records show that he bathed far more frequently than any of his contemporaries, for a habit so unusual it was worthy of note in the royal ledgers. He had a dedicated bathman on his payroll and would take a proper hot bath roughly once every 3 weeks. A luxury spa treatment by Jus century standards. Perhaps he was trying to wash away his sins, or perhaps he just really, really hated being dirty. Back here in the meadow, the tension is palpable. The barons have had enough. They've cornered him, not with swords drawn just yet, but with a document. It's a list of demands, a charter of liberties, the Magna Carta. Today, we see it as a foundational document for constitutional law. A noble declaration that no one, not even the king, is above the law. But as you watch the scene unfold, you see it for what it truly is in this moment, a royally reluctant peace treaty. John has no intention of honoring it. You can see it in the curl of his lip as he takes the quill. For him, this is a temporary setback, a promise made under duress that he will discard the moment he rides away from this damp field. He scans his eyes narrowing at clauses limiting his ability to levy taxes and punish his subjects without due process. To him, this isn't liberty. It's a direct assault on his God-given right to rule as he sees fit. With a flourish, he applies his seal. A sigh of relief ripples through some of the younger barons, but the older, more cynical men simply watch their king, their expressions unchanging. They know him. They know this is just an intermission in the conflict, not the finale. And they are right. John would almost immediately renege on the deal, plunging England into a brutal civil war known as the First Barons' War. It's in the aftermath of John's reign that his story gets even more complicated. Yet, for centuries, he was cemented in the popular imagination as the ultimate pantomime villain, the sneering, cruel antagonist to the heroic Robin Hood. But it's worth taking a step back and asking where that image comes from. Historians still argue whether his uniquely monstrous reputation was entirely of his own making, or if it was amplified by centuries of masterful propaganda. Much of what we know about John's personal failings was written down by chroniclers, decades, or even centuries after his death. Many of these writers were monks whose monasteries he had extorted, or historians writing under the Tudor dynasty who had a vested interest in portraying the preceding Plantagenet kings as illegitimate and tyrannical. Making the old kings look bad was good business for the new regime. It doesn't forgive his actions, of course, but it adds a layer of complexity. Was he truly the most perverted king, or just the one with the worst press agent? It's a debate that colors how we see him now, looking back through the hazy lens of time. As you stand there watching the king mount his horse and ride away from Runnymede, you are left with the quiet, unsettling truth of the man. A king defined by what he lacked: land, trust, loyalty, and ultimately control. He was a man whose personal appetites and deep-seated insecurities destabilized a nation, forcing its powerful to draw a line in the mud of a meadow and declare, for the first time, that the will of a king must have its limits. The story, of course, does not end here, for the path of medieval monarchy is littered with personalities even more curious, and reigns even more scandalous than that of John Lackland. The mists of Runnymede recede, and the memory of John Lackland dissolves into the long chronicle of English kings. Generations pass. Children who heard tales of the Barons' War are now grandparents themselves. The stone of castles has weathered, new forests have grown, and a new king sits on the throne. Your journey takes you forward almost a century, into the early Sambides. The air in the royal court feels different now, less about overt, brutish cruelty, and more about a simmering, elegant tension. You are now a witness to the reign of Edward II. He is nothing like his father, the fearsome Edward I, a man nicknamed Longshanks for his towering height, and Hammer of the Scots for his relentless military ambition. Where his father was a storm, Edward II is a curious calm. He is tall and handsome, every inch the storybook prints, but the iron will of his predecessor is absent. He carries himself not with a warrior's rigidity, but with an almost artistic grace. He doesn't hunger for the battlefield. He seems to crave something else entirely. Companionship, perhaps, or simply a life less ordinary than the one prescribed for a king. And this is where your attention is drawn to another man, someone who seems to perpetually stand in the king's personal light. His name is Piers Gaveston. He is a knight from Gascony, a region in southwestern France. He is not of high noble birth, a fact that the English barons never, ever forget. But he possesses a charisma that is almost incandescent. He is witty, sharp-tongued, and devastatingly charming, with an arrogance that he wears as comfortably as his fashionable clothes. You watch as he jokes with the king, their heads close together, sharing a laugh that excludes everyone else in the great hall. Gaveston is the only one who can make the king truly smile, and this private world they inhabit infuriates the stony-faced earls who line the chamber. Edward and Piers grew up together, a bond forged in their youth that only deepened when Edward became king. Upon his coronation, one of Edward's first acts was to elevate Gaveston to a status that left the entire nobility gasping. He bestowed upon him the earldom of Cornwall, a title traditionally reserved for members of the royal family. It was an audacious, almost reckless display of affection. It would be like a modern CEO making their favorite intern the company's vice president overnight. It completely bypassed the established. Gaveston was showered with lands, titles, and a level of influence that eclipsed even the most powerful barons, whose families had bled for the crown for generations. The two men were inseparable. When Edward was married to Isabella of France, a princess of legendary beauty, he reportedly paid more attention to Gaveston at the wedding feast than to his own new bride. The tapestries gifted to them by the French king, meant for the new royal couple, simply gifted onward to Piers. The barons watched this all with a mixture of rage and bewilderment. They saw Gaveston not just as a favorite, but as a parasite, draining the kingdom's wealth and, more importantly, monopolizing the king's attention. Gaveston, for his part, did little to soothe their ruffled feathers. He was notorious for bestowing mocking nicknames on the great lords of the realm. The powerful Earl of Warwick was the Black Dog of Arden. The Earl of Lincoln was Burst Belly. He was a court jester with the power of a second king, and his wit was a weapon that earned him mortal enemies. Adding to the scandal was Edward's own peculiar set of hobbies. While his nobles engaged in falconry and jousting, the king was drawn to more rustic pursuits. There are accounts of him enjoying manual labor, things a king simply did not do. You can almost picture the scene. A handful of bewildered lords ride out from the castle, seeking an audience, only to find their sovereign shoulder to shoulder with common laborers, digging ditches or thatching a roof. Shopi, historians and chroniclers of the time noted with disdain his love for rowing, swimming, and even associating with hedgers and ditchers. He was fascinated by the work of smiths and craftsmen. For the rigid, class-obsessed aristocracy, this was profoundly undignified. It was as if the king preferred the company of peasants to their own. A monarch was supposed to be separate, elevated, almost divine. Edward's desire to get his hands dirty was just another sign. That he wasn't fit for the celestial loneliness of the throne. The tension eventually reached its breaking point. This wasn't about petty jealousy anymore. It was a full-blown political crisis. The barons, led by Edward's own cousin, the immensely wealthy and powerful Thomas of Lancaster, decided to take action. It feels like a grim echo of what happened at Runnymede all those years ago. They confronted the king not with swords, but once again with a document. These were the ordinances of Ichensambai Isri. Think of them as a set of rules forced upon the king to curb his power, and, most critically, to deal with Gaveston once and for all. A central clause of the ordinances demanded Piers Gaveston's permanent exile. It declared him a public enemy an evil counselor who had led the king astray. Edward, outmaneuvered and facing the unified opposition of his most powerful subjects, had no choice but to agree. Gaveston was banished for a third time for Haverham. Now, as we look back on this intense, obsessive relationship, we're left with a question that hangs over the entire reign. Historians still argue whether the bond between Edward and Gaveston was romantic and sexual, or if it was an intensely close but platonic brotherhood. Some medieval chroniclers, often writing with a hostile agenda, strongly imply a sexual relationship, using it to frame Edward as unnatural and unfit to rule. They speak of an inordinate affection that transgressed the bounds of normal friendship. Others argue that this language could simply describe a very powerful male bond, an oath of brotherhood that Edward, in his social isolation as king, took to an extreme. It might have been a purely political partnership that the socially awkward king simply fumbled, turning a potential ally into a lightning rod for all the kingdom's discontents. We will likely never know the precise truth of what happened in the privacy of their chambers. What is certain, however, is that the perception of their relationship, whatever its reality, was enough to destabilize the nation. The story of Piers Gaveston ends grimly. Believing the storm had passed, or perhaps called back by a king who couldn't bear the separation, Gaveston returned to England in defiance of the ordinances. Gaveston, the black dog of Arden, the Earl of Warwick whom he had mocked, made good on a promise to make Gaveston feel his teeth. Gaveston was captured by the furious barons. After a brief show trial, he was taken to Blacklow Hill and executed. As you picture Edward receiving this news, you sense that this event broke something inside him. His favorite, his brother in all but blood, was murdered by his own cousins and countrymen. The act was a brutal and personal wound from which Edward would never recover. It turned the simmering political discord into a bitter blood feud, poisoning the rest of his reign and setting him on a tragic course. That would ultimately lead to his own deposition and a chillingly mysterious death. You are left standing in the halls of a court, now heavy with silence. A place where personal love, whether for a friend or a lover, proved to be a fatal political flaw. The melancholy air of the English court fades behind you. Carried away on the salty spray of the Channel, you trade the damp greens and greys of England for the rich, sun-drenched landscape of late 16th century France. The language shifts, the fashions become more daring, the wine flows more freely. This is a kingdom at the height of its cultural power, a world of chivalric romance, flamboyant tournaments, and soaring Gothic cathedrals. And at its heart is a king who, at first, seems to embody all of its youthful promise, Charles VI, a ruler once known as Charles the Beloved. When you first see him, he is energetic and personable, with a great love for festivals, hunts, and all the glittering pageantry of royal life. He seems determined to be a good king, to rule justly and maintain the peace. But a shadow hangs over his lineage, a known history of mental instability in his mother's family. And one sweltering summer day, deep in the forest of Le Mans, that shadow lunges forward to claim him. You are part of the royal retinue, a long column of knights and nobles riding through the oppressive heat. Dust cakes your throat, and the sun glinting off 1,000 steel helmets is almost blinding. The atmosphere is tense. There has just been an assassination attempt on a high-ranking official, and the royal party is on its way to deal with the culprit. Suddenly, a page, drowsy from the heat, drops a lance, which clatters loudly against the helmet of the knight in front of him. The sharp metallic clang echoes through the trees, and in the king's mind something shatters. He convulses in his saddle. His eyes, once clear and friendly, are now wild with terror and rage. To him, the sound is not an accident, it's a signal. He has been betrayed. Screaming that traitors are upon him, he draws his sword and charges his own men. His own brother shrinks back in horror as the king, his face a mask of madness, begins to cut down the very knights sworn to protect him. They don't dare fight back against their sacred king. They can only scatter, trying to corral him, to gently disarm him without causing injury. By the time they succeed, several men lie dead or dying, and the king has collapsed into a deep, unshakable coma. When he finally awakens, he is different. The vibrant young king is gone, replaced by a confused, fragile man. And from the wreckage of his mind, a strange and terrible obsession is born. You watch him in the following months as he develops what would become his most famous affliction, the glass delusion. Charles begins to believe that his body is made entirely of glass. He is terrified of being touched, certain that even a gentle pat on the arm will cause him to shatter into 1,000 pieces. He refuses to allow people to approach him too closely, recoiling if they do. He sits motionless in his chambers for hours on end, terrified that any sudden movement might cause a fatal fracture. To protect himself, he has special reinforced clothing sewn, with iron rods stitched into the fabric to keep his fragile form rigid and safe from accidental bumps. He becomes a living statue, a king who can rule only from a distance, encased in a prison of his own delusion. It's a tragic condition, but you can't help but think he was the world's first and most literal handle with care. Notice. His condition comes in waves. There are long periods of illness, where he is completely lost to the world, followed by intervals of lucidity, where he returns to himself, horrified by what he has become and desperately trying to resume his duties. It is during one of these good periods that the court, desperate for some normalcy and cheer, organizes a celebration. It is a masquerade ball to celebrate the remarriage of one of the Queen's ladies-in-waiting, and it is here that you will witness an event so catastrophic, it will be seared into the memory of the French court forever. The Bal des Ardents, the Ball of the Burning Men, arose. The idea is one of mischievous fun. The king and 5 of his closest companions will disguise themselves as wild men of the woods. You see them being prepared, their bodies coated in flammable pitch, and then covered from head to toe in fine linen and soft feathers, making them look like shaggy, mythical beasts. They are chained together and shuffle into the torchlit ballroom, howling and capering, their identities a secret to all but a few. The court ladies shriek with delighted fear, trying to guess who the mysterious dancers are. The hall is crowded, hot, and filled with the glow of countless torches held by attendants along the walls. The king's brother, Louis of Orleans, and his uncle, the Duke of Berry, arrive late, unaware of the king's presence among the dancers, and eager to discover their identities. They drunkenly stumble forward, snatching a torch from an attendant to get a better look. A spark, that's all it takes. A single ember floats from the torch and lands on the pitch-soaked costume of one of the dancers. Amber. In a heartbeat, the man is engulfed in a pillar of flame. The fire leaps, with a terrifying whoosh, from one chained dancer to the next. The ballroom erupts into a scene of pure horror. The wild men become human torches, their screams of agony lost in the panicked shouts of the courtiers. The smell of burning pitch and flesh fills the air. In the chaos, the quick-thinking Duchess of Berry recognizes the king. She throws her voluminous skirts and cloak over him, shielding him from the flames and suffocating the fire that had just begun to catch on his own costume, saving his life. 4 of his friends are burned to death, one surviving only by diving into a vat of wine. The king is unharmed physically, but the horror of the event pitches him back into the depths of madness, this time more severe than ever. In the aftermath, his moments of clarity become rarer, his descents into psychosis deeper. It's during this long decline that the most poignant and quirky details of his illness emerge. He would wander the halls of the Hotel Saint Paul like a ghost, failing to recognize his own wife, Queen Isabeau of Bavaria, and shoving her away as a stranger. He couldn't remember the names of his children. Sometimes, he couldn't even remember his own name. He would forget he was king. Attendants would find him staring blankly at his own coat of arms, a golden fleurs-de-lis on a blue field, and he would have to be patiently reminded that they belonged to him. For entire stretches of time, he refused to wash or change his clothes, convinced he wasn't made of glass anymore. but that he was Saint George, and he would spend his days in silence, poring over a book of saints. This shattering of a royal mind leaves us, even now, with a profound medical mystery. Scholarly discussion remains open on the precise medical diagnosis for his condition. Without the tools of modern psychiatry, contemporary physicians were at a loss, blaming it on everything from divine punishment to sorcery. Modern theories range widely. Some suggest he had a form of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, which would account for the cycling between manic energy and deep depression or catatonia. Others propose a metabolic disease like porphyria, which can have neurological symptoms and is known to have run in other royal families. The truth is buried with him, leaving only the devastating account of a reign ruled by a waking nightmare. As you watch the once beloved king stare vacantly out a window, a man lost inside his own mind, you understand that sometimes the most terrifying monsters in a king's life aren't foreign invaders or rebellious barons, but the phantoms born within his own head. The glass-like fragility of the French king dissolves, and our journey carries you southward, across the jagged Pyrenees mountains. The air changes. The humidity of northern Europe gives way to a dry, brilliant heat that bakes the landscape into shades of ochre and burnt sienna. You find yourself in the kingdom of Castile, the heart of medieval Spain. Here, the struggle is not against a king's inner demons, but against the very real and bloody consequences of his iron will. You have arrived in the court of a man known to history by a chillingly simple name, Peter the Cruel. His actual name is Pedro I of Castile. As you first lay eyes on him, you see a man who radiates an unnerving intensity. Unlike the tragically lost Charles VI, Peter is entirely in control of his faculties. He is intelligent, decisive, and possessed of a ferocious energy. But beneath the surface of royal authority, there is a deep current of suspicion. His reign is a tangled web of shifting allegiances, familial betrayal, and political assassination. His world is divided cleanly in two, those who are completely loyal to him, and those who are his enemies, destined for a swift and often merciless end. The central drama of Peter's life stems from his own family. His father, the king before him, had a long-standing and very public affair, resulting in a brood of illegitimate half-brothers, the Trastamaras, led by the ambitious and capable Henry. From the moment Peter takes the throne, there is a simmering rivalry. Peter sees them as a constant threat to his legitimate claim. They see him as an obstacle to the power they feel they deserve. It's a family feud that will soon ignite into a full-blown civil war, and you are now a quiet observer on its front lines. But Peter's heart is not occupied with politics alone. His devotion lies entirely with one woman, Maria de Padilla. She is a Castilian noblewoman, beautiful and intelligent, and from the beginning, she is his one true confidante and love. This profound attachment, however, clashes with his royal duty. To secure a vital alliance with France, Peter is politically obligated to marry a French princess, a young woman named Blanche of Bourbon. The wedding is a cold, formal affair. You watch as Peter goes through the motions, his gaze distant, his mind clearly elsewhere. Just 3 days after the ceremony, he abandons his new bride. He simply leaves her, returning immediately to the side of Maria de Padilla, with whom he would go on to have 4 children. To say this caused a scandal would be an understatement. It was a diplomatic catastrophe and a profound personal insult to the King of France. Blanche, the young queen, alone in a foreign land and rejected by her husband, becomes a pawn in the deadly political game. Peter has her moved from one remote castle to another, effectively keeping her under house arrest. A few years later, she dies in her confinement. At the age of just war, the mysterious death of his young French wife, Blanche of Bourbon, became a rallying cry for his enemies. They claimed, with very little evidence but a great deal of political force, that Peter had her poisoned. It was the perfect piece of propaganda. Peter the Cruel the king who murdered his own innocent queen. Yet, as you walk through Peter's favored residence, you see a side of him that seems utterly at odds with his ruthless reputation. He shuns the dark, heavy fortresses of his ancestors and chooses to build and expand his palace in Seville, the magnificent Alcazar. You move through its courtyards, and the oppressive heat of the day seems to vanish. The sound of gentle fountains echoes in halls lined with intricate geometric tilework. The famous azulejos. Sunlight filters through carved stucco screens, dappling the polished marble floors. It is a masterpiece of Mudéjar art, a style created by Moorish craftsmen for Christian patrons. Peter's profound admiration for Moorish art and architecture is a strange and beautiful contradiction in his character. He, a Christian king fighting endless wars, chose to live surrounded by the artistic traditions of the Islamic rulers his ancestors had displaced. And his passion for this delicate, complex beauty, for harmony and design, existed right alongside his capacity for cold-blooded vengeance. He was, it seems, a man who appreciated finely crafted interiors while engaging in brutally ugly politics. Salian, his cruelty was undeniably real. He dealt with perceived threats with terrifying finality. When his half-brother Fadrique, the master of the Order of Santiago, visited him in the Alcazar, the very palace of serene beauty, Peter had him summarily executed in the courtyard. According to legend, Peter watched from a balcony as the deed was done. He hunted down nobles he suspected of treason and eliminated them without trial. This wasn't the chaotic rage of Charles VI, but a cold, calculated purging of his enemies. He believed he was simply securing his throne, cutting out the cancerous rot of dissent before it could spread. This very brutality, however, forms the core of the great debate about his legacy. While English-language history almost universally labels him the cruel, in Spain, the picture is more complex. Historians in Spain are still divided on his legacy, arguing whether he was a monstrous tyrant, el cruel, or a firm administrator, el justiciero, the just. His supporters, both then and now, argue that his actions were necessary. They claim the nobles he executed were lawless bullies who terrorized the common folk and plotted constant rebellion. In this reading of history, Peter was a champion of the merchant class and the common people, a king who tried to impose a centralized royal justice on a dangerously fragmented kingdom. He wasn't being cruel, they argue. He was being just, holding the powerful accountable for the first time. The truth, as is so often the case, probably lies somewhere in the murky middle. He was likely a man who used justice as a tool for his own paranoid, personal vengeance. The conflict with his half-brother Henry of Trastramar eventually escalates into open war, a brutal contest for the throne that drags on for years, even drawing in foreign powers like England and France. But Peter's story ends not in a grand battle, but in a quiet, grim betrayal. After a battlefield defeat, Peter seeks refuge in a fortress. He is lured out to a parley tent, under a flag of truce, to meet with Henry's commander, but Henry himself is waiting in ambush. The two half-brothers, enemies since birth, come face to face. Accounts say they lunged at each other, Peter gaining the upper hand, when one of Henry's men intervened, pulling Peter down. As they wrestled on the floor of the tent, Henry drew a dagger and stabbed his brother again and again, ending the reign of Peter the Cruel in a final, fratricidal spasm of violence. You are left standing in the imagined silence of that tent, a testament to a reign where love, paranoia, and blood were inextricably intertwined. The memory of the dagger in the dark tent dissolves, and with it, the parched plains of Castile. Your journey takes its final leap, not just over land and sea, but forward in time. You travel past the age of plate armor and into an era of booming cannons and the first whispers of a new, modern world. You arrive in 19th century England, a kingdom brimming with newfound confidence, humanist philosophy, and a king whose personality is so immense so all-consuming that he seems to pull the very gravity of history toward himself. Our story concludes here, in the court of Henry VIII. When you first encounter him, he is not the bloated, menacing figure from the famous portraits. He is a young man, and he is magnificent. This is not a king born in the shadows like John Lackland, or one who shies from his duties like Edward II. Henry is a true Renaissance prince. He is tall, athletic, and dazzlingly handsome. He excels at everything he tries: jousting, tennis, archery, wrestling. He is a skilled musician who composes his own songs, a talented scholar who speaks multiple languages, and a devout Catholic who even writes a treatise defending the faith against Martin Luther, earning him the title Defender of the Faith from the Pope himself. His court is a vibrant hub of art and culture, a sun in which all of Europe's rising stars wish to orbit. He embodies an almost intoxicating sense of possibility, but beneath the golden exterior lies an ego of monumental proportions and an obsessive need for control. His single greatest anxiety is the continuation of his new dynasty, the Tudors. He needs a son, a male heir to secure his family's still fragile grip on the English throne. His wife, Catherine of Aragon, a Spanish princess and the widow of his elder brother, has failed to provide one, giving him only a daughter, Mary. As Henry's ardor for Catherine cools, his eyes fall upon a woman of the court who is unlike any he has known, Anne Boleyn. She is not conventionally beautiful, but she has a fiery intelligence, a sharp wit, and a captivating allure here. Most importantly, she refuses to be his mistress. She will be queen, or nothing, and so begins the king's great matter. Henry, convinced his marriage to Catherine was invalid in the eyes of God, seeks an annulment from the Pope. But the Pope is, at the moment, essentially a political prisoner of Catherine's nephew, the Holy Roman Emperor. The answer is no. For any other king, this might have been the end of it. But Henry's desire for Anne and for an heir will not be denied. If the mountain will not come to Muhammad, then Muhammad must bulldoze the mountain. You watch as his frustration hardens into resolve. He will not be told no. He will not be governed by a distant power in Rome. With a series of revolutionary legal acts, he shatters 1,000 years of religious tradition. He breaks England away from the Catholic Church, declares himself the supreme head of the Church of England, and gets the annulment he so desperately craves. With this newfound power, his appetites, once held in check, are fully unleashed. This is most clear in what happens next. You watch as he unleashes what will become known as the dissolution of the monasteries. For centuries, monasteries had been vast, powerful institutions, owning perhaps a quarter of all the land in England. To Henry, they are now relics of a papal system he has rejected, and more importantly, they are bursting with wealth. He sends commissioners across the country to inspect them, who return with tales, some true, many wildly exaggerated, of corruption and vice. It's all the pretext he needs. He launches the greatest, most ruthless asset-stripping operation in English history. Lead is stripped from roofs, bells are melted down, priceless manuscripts are destroyed, and vast tracts of land are seized by the crown and sold off to the gentry. The cultural and social toll is immense, but Henry's treasury is suddenly overflowing. He has the money to fund his wars and to live in the magnificent style he believes he deserves. His appetite for women becomes just as notorious. His marital policy becomes a rather grim version of out with the old, in with the new. Anne Boleyn, who moved heaven and earth for him, fails to produce a son and is executed on trumped-up charges of adultery. Jane Seymour gives him his long-awaited son, but dies in childbirth. Anne of Cleves is divorced for being diplomatically and personally unappealing. Catherine Howard follows her cousin Anne Boleyn to the executioner's block for actual adultery. Only his final wife, Catherine Parr, manages to outlive him. He remakes the religious and political landscape of his nation based on the machinations of his own bedchamber. Now our story finds him in his final years. The Golden Prince is gone, a distant memory. In his place is a man of gargantuan size, weighing nearly 400 pounds, so large he has to be moved about his palaces with mechanical devices. His youthful energy has curdled into paranoia and permanent rage, and a new torment has joined him, one that defines his last decade. It's the gruesome, festering wound on his leg, the result of an old jousting accident that never properly healed. The ulcer is constantly open, weeping pus, and the smell is so overpowering that courtiers can tell which rooms the king has been in long after he has departed. Physicians constantly treat it, cauterizing it, dressing it, but nothing works. The pain is relentless, fueling his already ferocious temper. A young courtier might make a minor mistake, and in a flash of agony-induced rage, the king orders him. It's a kind of foul living sermon on the consequences of absolute power and a high-sugar diet. The festering leg becomes a physical symbol of the man himself, powerful, bloated, and rotting from within. Looking back on this titanic reign, it's no surprise that the long-standing historical debate revolves around whether Henry was a forward-thinking Renaissance prince or a paranoid, reactionary despot. One side argues that, despite his personal monstrousness, he was a revolutionary. He inadvertently ushered in the English Reformation, strengthened Parliament's role, created a powerful navy, and forged a new sense of English national identity, separate and proud. In this view, his tyranny was simply the necessary, ugly force required to heave England into the modern era. The other side argues that this gives him far too much credit. They see a man driven entirely by personal ego, lust, and greed. Sure, he was not a Protestant reformer, but a man who wanted to be his own pope. His actions were not those of a visionary statesman, but of a tyrant who bled his country and murdered his subjects, including 2 of his wives, to get what he wanted. And with that, our journey through the shadowy halls of power comes to an end. From the greedy, grasping hands of John Lackland to the tragic devotion of Edward II, from the shattered glass mind of Charles VI to the calculated cruelties of Peter of Castile, and finally to the monumental appetites of Henry VIII, we have seen how the immense is a shadow of the truth, great deceptions of the ancient world. Jung. Your journey begins not in a grand hall of records, nor in a dusty library, but on a stretch of sand, cool and damp under the pale light of a rising sun. You stand on the shore and watch the horizon. For 10 long years, this view has been blighted by a fleet of black-hulled ships, a constant, menacing reminder of the war that has raged just outside your city walls. But now they are gone. The Achaean fleet, the Greek menace, has vanished. All that remains are specks, shrinking with every passing moment, disappearing into the vast, indifferent blue of the Aegean Sea. A profound quiet has settled over the landscape, a silence so deep it feels heavier than any sound. The ceaseless clang of bronze on bronze, the shouts of men, the screams of the wounded, all have been replaced by the gentle lapping of waves and the lonely cry of a gull wheeling overhead. You are a Trojan, and for the first time in a decade, you feel the muscles in your shoulders begin to unclench. The great siege is over. It seems the gods have finally smiled upon your city. Your people pour out from the towering Scaean gate, tentative at first, like creatures emerging from a long hibernation. Then, with growing confidence, they stream onto the plain, walking through the ashes of the Greek camp. It is a scene of immense relief. You see children, born during the war, touching the sea for the first time. You see old men, their faces etched with the grief of lost sons, weeping silently into their hands. The air smells of salt, seaweed, and the ghosts of 1,000 campfires. After a 10-year roommate situation from Hades, your unwelcome guests have finally moved out, though they haven't been kind enough to clean up after themselves. As you meander through the detritus of the abandoned camp, discarded bits of armor, cracked pottery, the ghostly outlines of where tents once stood, you see it. Looming over the scene, impossibly large and profoundly out of place, is the horse. It stands silent and still, a mountain of fir planks skillfully joined together. It is magnificent, in a monstrous, unsettling way. Its wooden hide gleams in the morning sun, each plank a slightly different shade of brown and gray. Its head is raised, its eyes are blank, staring sightlessly toward the gates of your city, Troy. The sheer scale is difficult to process. It is taller than the surrounding siege towers the Greeks had abandoned, wider than any chariot. You could not wrap your arms around one of its legs if you tried. There is no adornment, no saddle, no bridle. It is just horse. An offering, so it seems. A plaque on its side, barely legible, dedicates it to the goddess Athena, a plea for a safe journey home for the Greeks. A murmur ripples through the crowd. Awe, confusion, and a burgeoning, joyous excitement. An offering to the gods! A sign of their final defeat. This is a monument to your victory, they say. Proof that Troy stands inviolable, protected by its mighty walls and the favor of the heavens. King Priam himself, his back bent with age and sorrow but his eyes shining with renewed hope, approaches the effigy. He sees it as a symbol of peace, a divine trophy to be brought within the city and celebrated. This colossal lawn ornament is, to his weary mind, the final punctuation mark on a decade of suffering, but not everyone shares this jubilant conviction. You hear a sharp, angry voice cut through the growing chatter. It is Laocoon, priest of Poseidon. He strides forward, his robes billowing behind him, his face a mask of suspicion. He strikes the flank of the horse with his spear, and a hollow, booming echo answers. A deep, resonant sound that seems to wrongfoot the entire crowd. "Are you mad?" he bellows, his voice cracking with urgency. "Do you not know the gifts of the Greeks? I fear the Danaans, even when they bear gifts." He warns that the horse is either filled with hidden soldiers, or it is a machine of war, a trick designed to overcome the walls that have protected you for so long. A reasonable safety announcement? A reminder to always read the terms and conditions before accepting a gargantuan wooden present, from an enemy who has spent the last 10 years trying to kill you. As if on cue, another voice rises, filled not with anger, but with a chilling, melodic despair. It is Cassandra, Priam's own daughter, the prophetess cursed by Apollo, so that her true visions would never be believed. She screams of fire and death, of a city laid low, of blood running in the streets. Her hair is wild, her eyes wide with a terror only she can see. The Trojans shuffle their feet and look away. Poor Cassandra. The war has been hard on her. They have heard her prophecies of doom for years. And yet Troy still stands. Today, on this day of all days, her cries seem especially misplaced. This is the central friction you now feel. The overwhelming desire for peace, for celebration, for this long nightmare to be over, is pitted against the stark warnings of a few. And as you stand there, caught between relief and a budding seed of dread, history itself holds its breath. Indeed, historians still argue whether the Trojan horse was a literal, magnificent deception, a hollow vessel of men, or perhaps a poetic metaphor. Some suggest it represented a battering ram, perhaps one shaped like an equine head, or it may have been an allusion to the god Poseidon, the earth-shaker, whose symbol was the horse, implying that an earthquake was what truly breached the city's famous walls. Truly breached the safeness, the site of Hisarlik in modern-day Turkey, which the daring archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann identified as the historical Troy in the Ichen Badbai Tirschers, has revealed layers of cities, many destroyed by fire. The truth of your moment, it seems, is buried under millennia of earth and poetry. But you are not a historian, you are just a Trojan on a beach, and you must watch as this debate unfolds. Laocoon's warning hangs heavy in the air, but then something happens. From the sea, two monstrous serpents rise, their coils glistening, their eyes burning like embers. They slither directly towards Laocoon and his two young sons. The crowd scatters in panic. You are frozen in place as the beasts wrap themselves around the priest and his children, crushing them in their coils. Their agonizing screams are quickly silenced. The meaning of this horrific event is instantly twisted by the relieved Trojans. It is a sign. Athena herself has punished Laocoon for striking her sacred offering. His skepticism was sacrilege. His warning was an insult to the gods. With this divine and frankly terrifying endorsement, the debate is over. All doubt is erased, washed away by a tide of jubilant, desperate conviction. The decision is made. The horse will enter the city, great ropes are thrown around its neck. Rollers are placed under its feet, and the people of Troy, your people, begin to pull. It is a joyous procession. The entire city seems to be heaving, singing, and cheering. They adorn the wooden beast with garlands of flowers. It's quite the parade, and certainly a step up from the grim processions of the past decade. To make way for its enormous size, a section of the city wall has to be broken down, the very wall that had been your salvation for 10 years. You watch as the stones are dismantled, creating a gaping wound in your city's defenses. Through this breach, the great horse is pulled, its wooden feet groaning and scraping against the stone streets. It rolls past your home, its shadow falling over your doorway for a moment, cold and absolute. As evening falls, the horse stands in the central square of the citadel, a silent guest of honor. The city erupts in celebration. Wine flows freely, torches are lit, and songs of victory echo off the ancient stones. The weariness of a decade gives way to a single night of blissful, unrestrained joy. You see the smiles on the faces of your friends and neighbors, and you allow yourself to smile too. The war is over. You are safe. The divine horse in your square is a testament to your endurance, your piousness, your ultimate triumph. The gods are with Troy, tucked within the unassailable walls of your home, with a holy trophy in your midst. You feel, finally and completely, secure. You prepare for a night of deep, peaceful sleep, the first of many to come. Your slumber is deep, but it is not the dreamless, peaceful void you had longed for. The image of the great wooden horse, stark and silent in your city square, fades from your mind's eye. The cool stone of Troy dissolves, replaced by an oppressive, suffocating heat that seems to bake the very air you breathe. You are no longer in your bed, safe within familiar walls. You have drifted through time and space, your sleeping consciousness now tethered to a different scene, a different deception, unfolding under a blazing, pitiless sun. You are standing on the sandy plains of what will one day be called Syria, near a lush ribbon of green that marks the Orontes River. A city formidable and well fortified looms in the middle distance. This is Kadesh, and you are with the army of Egypt. The scale of the operation is immense. Thousands of men, tents laid out in a sprawling, meticulously ordered rectangle, and horses, so many horses, their tails flicking at the persistent flies. The air is thick with dust, the smell of hot metal, animal sweat, and cooking fires. The hum of the camp is a low, constant murmur, the sound of a living machine preparing for war. At the center of it all, in a magnificent pavilion adorned with golden finials and symbols of power, is the pharaoh himself, Ramesses II, Ramesses the Great. He is young, confident, radiating an aura of divine right that is as palpable as the heat. This is his first major military campaign as sole ruler, and he is determined to make it a glorious one. He has come here to wrest control of Kadesh back from the rival Hittite Empire, to etch his name into the annals of history as a mighty conqueror, a worthy successor to the warrior pharaohs before him. His primary army corps, the division of Amun, is with him, camped and ready. 3 other divisions, Ra, Ptah, and Set, are marching somewhere behind him, presumably making their way here at a rather more relaxed pace. It is a slight organizational oversight, the ancient equivalent of arriving at the business meeting. Before your marketing, legal and accounting teams, suddenly there is a stir. A small patrol of Egyptian soldiers drags two shuffling, weary-looking men towards the royal tent. They are local nomads, Bedouins, their skin leathery from the sun. They are brought before the pharaoh and they fall to their knees. They bring news, wonderful news it seems. They claim to have deserted the Hittite cause. The Hittite king, Mu'attali II, they say, is terrified of the approaching Egyptian might. He has gathered his forces and retreated far to the north, to the land of Aleppo. You watch as a wave of relief and triumphant satisfaction washes over the Egyptian commanders. The pharaoh's face beams. The enemy has turned tail before the first spear has even been thrown. It is a testament to his power, to the fear his name inspires. The intelligence is a gift. A perfect, welcome gift that confirms his own grand assumptions about himself. The Bedouins are rewarded, and the camp relaxes even further. There is no hurry. They can fortify their position and wait for the other divisions to catch up before beginning a leisurely pursuit of the cowardly Hittites. But like that other famous gift you just witnessed, this one has a hollow core. The Bedouins are not deserters. They are spies, planted by Mu'attali II, and the Hittite army is not in Aleppo. It is hiding, coiled like a serpent, just on the other side of Kadesh, beyond a small rise in the terrain. Every Egyptian cheer, every moment of relaxed preparation, is being watched by thousands of unseen enemy eyes. The trap is sprung with terrifying speed. You hear it before you see it. A low rumble that grows into a deafening thunder, the sound of the very earth shaking. Then they appear, cresting the rise. A wave of chariots, not the light, two-man chariots of the Egyptians, but the Hittites' heavier, more powerful model. These are the ancient world's monster trucks, carrying a crew of 3. A driver, a spearman, and a shield-bearer to protect them. An absolute torrent of 2,500 of these machines slams into the flank of the unsuspecting division of Ra, which had just been arriving and setting up its own camp. Chaos erupts. The orderly Egyptian lines disintegrate into a mad scramble of panic and confusion. The Hittite chariots plow through the tents and the soldiers, a force of irresistible momentum. Men are scattered like pins. Standards topple. You see Pharaoh's own camp, your camp, suddenly under attack. The perfect rectangle of tents is breached, and the slaughter begins. From your vantage point, you see Ramesses, the God King, the center of this entire universe, completely cut off. His personal guard is fighting desperately around him, but they are overwhelmed. The vast Egyptian army has effectively vanished, its leadership structure shattered in a single, devastating charge. Defeat is not just possible, it is imminent. The great pharaoh is about to be captured or killed, his glorious campaign turning into a historic catastrophe. This is the moment where the story should have ended for Ramesses. But this is where his own version of the story begins. And his version is, you have to admit, spectacular. According to the tale, he will later carve into the walls of temples. From Abu Simbel to Luxor, Ramesses does not panic. He does not surrender. He looks around at the carnage, sees his army has abandoned him, and he turns not to his men but to his god, Amun. He prays a desperate, furious prayer, accusing the god of abandoning him. Then, filled with a divine fury, he acts. Alone. Single-handedly, he puts on his armor, mounts his chariot, victory in Thebes, and charges. Not away from the enemy, but directly into the heart of the encircling Hittite chariot force. You watch this impossible sight. 1 golden chariot against 1,000. He claims to have crashed through the Hittite lines not once, not twice, but 6 separate times, his arrows felling enemies by the score, his divine presence throwing the entire enemy force into disarray. He becomes an incarnation of the storm god Set, a whirlwind of destruction. The Hittites, who were moments from capturing a pharaoh, are supposedly so terrified of this single, godlike warrior that their attack falters. The king of Aleppo, a Hittite vassal, is said to have cried out to his men, "This is no man in our midst. He who fights us is Set, great of strength, Baal in the flesh." It's the kind of over-the-top compliment you'd expect from an enemy in a movie script written by the hero himself, and here lies the heart of the deception. The blurring of reality and propaganda. Historians still argue whether Ramesses' account portrays a genuine, miraculous triumph of personal valor or simply the most masterfully spun battlefield report in human history. The truth is likely somewhere in between. Ramesses' desperate charge likely did happen. It was a brave, perhaps suicidal, act of a cornered king. What the official account conveniently downplays is that, just as his situation became truly hopeless, one of his other army divisions, the Nearin, opportunely appeared on the scene and smashed into the Hittite rear, stabilizing the line. His victory was not single-handed. It was secured by the timely arrival of the very reinforcements he had failed to wait for. Hayfire. Kistanes. Canst. The battle grinds on, devolving from a rout into a messy, bloody stalemate. By day's end, both sides are exhausted. The Hittites hold the field, but have suffered grievous losses. The Egyptians have survived annihilation, but have failed to take Kadesh. Mu'tali II ritually claims victory, as does Ramesses. The next day, Ramesses gathers his battered forces and begins the long march back to Egypt. He has failed in his military objective, but as he retreats, the great deception, the true campaign, is just beginning in his mind. He will not return to his people as a king who barely escaped with his life. He will return as a living legend. He will commission the poem and the bulletin, two detailed accounts of the battle that focus almost entirely on his personal, divinely inspired heroism. He will have these stories and magnificent images of his solitary charge carved onto the stone walls of nearly every major temple in Egypt. For the next 3,000 years, anyone who looks upon the temples at Karnak, Luxor, Abydos, and his own magnificent Abu Simbel will see the same story. Ramesses, alone, scattering his enemies like chaff in the wind. He seized control of the narrative so completely that it is his version, not the messy stalemate of reality, that has become the definitive memory of Kadesh. You watch him, no longer just a warrior king, but a master of public relations, realizing that the story of the battle can be far more powerful than the battle itself. The heat of the Egyptian sun fades from your mind. The clamor of chariots and the triumphant, sculpted lies of a pharaoh dissolving like a mirage. The scent of dust and river water is replaced by something else entirely. It's Kintyre. It is the smell of damp stone, of incense ingrained in marble over centuries, of old parchment and cooling rain. You have drifted forward again, not through space, but through a chasm of nearly 2,000 years. The world has been broken and remade many times over. Since Ramesses penned his heroic epic, empires have risen and crumbled, and you find yourself now in a place that has seen it all, Rome. But this is not the bustling, magnificent Rome of the Caesars at their height. The gleam of the imperial age has tarnished. The great forum below is quieter, its grand buildings repurposed, its stone pilfered for humbler projects. The throngs are thinner. This is a later Rome, a city haunted by its own monumental past, a place of echoing footsteps and deep shadows. Yet, within these shadows, a new power is coalescing, one built not on legions and gold, but on faith in Scripture. You are drawn to a quiet room within the Lateran Palace, the residence of the Pope. It is a scriptorium, a place where knowledge is preserved, copied, and, sometimes, created from whole cloth. The only sounds are the gentle scratch of a quill on vellum and the sigh of the wind outside. A monk, his face lit by the buttery glow of a single oil lamp, is bent over his work. He is not copying an old text. He is composing a new one. But his task is to make it look ancient, to imbue it with the full weight and authority of a past golden age. Padi, the past. He writes in a formal, stilted Latin, mimicking the style of the imperial chanceries from 4 centuries prior. This is not a simple letter. It is an act of meticulous, audacious forgery. You are witnessing the birth of the Constitutum Constantini, the donation of Constantine, and it is, by any measure, a masterpiece of deceptive ambition. The document tells a story, a wonderfully convenient one. It begins with the Emperor Constantine the Great, the first Christian emperor, the man who changed the course of Western history. In this telling, Constantine is afflicted not with political turmoil or military concerns, but with a horrifying case of leprosy. The pagan priests, so the story goes, advise a rather gruesome cure. He must bathe in the blood of freshly slaughtered children. It's a detail designed to make you shudder, to cast the old ways in the most barbaric light possible. But Constantine, being a man of nascent good character, refuses. He is rewarded for his compassion with a dream vision. In it, the saints Peter and Paul appear and tell him to seek out Pope Sylvester I. So the emperor, covered in sores, humbly seeks out the pope. Sylvester, a figure largely ignored by actual contemporary historical accounts, is cast in the starring role. He baptizes Constantine, and at the moment of baptism, a miracle occurs. The emperor's leprosy is instantly and completely cured. His skin is made clean, his health is restored, he is reborn, both in faith and in body, overwhelmed with gratitude. This fictionalized Constantine decides to give the Pope a small thank you gift. And here the forger's quill doesn't just write, it builds a new world order. The document you see being drafted declares that Emperor Constantine, in his infinite gratitude, grants Pope Sylvester and all his successors, for all time, supreme authority over the other major patriarchates of the Church. But it does not stop there. It gets better. Constantine then gives the Pope temporal dominion, that is, the power of a king, over the city of Rome, over all of Italy, and indeed over the entire Western Roman Empire. He effectively hands the keys to half the world to the head of the Church. Then, to make sure this new arrangement isn't awkward, the document has Constantine announce that he's moving out. He will relocate his own capital from Rome to a new city, Byzantium, later Constantinople, because it wouldn't be right for a secular emperor to hang around and rule in the same city where God had installed the head of the Christian religion. It's an absurdly polite justification for abandoning the traditional heart of your empire, the political equivalent of leaving a note on the fridge. This is the great deception being laid down, ink on parchment. A quiet reframing of history to serve a present need. It is an answer to a question that plagued the papacy of the Bath century. In a world of kings and emperors, where does the Pope's authority truly come from? Is he merely a spiritual leader, or does he have a rightful claim to land, to armies, to be a power among powers? Scholars continue to debate the exact year and under which specific pope the donation was forged, but its purpose is brutally clear, with the Byzantine emperor trying to assert his influence from the east, and with Frankish kings like Pepin the Short rising to power in the west, the pope needed leverage. He needed a document, he needed a story, and like Ramesses realizing that a well-told story of victory was better than a messy real one, the Pope's scribes realized a story of a grand ancient gift was far more useful than no claim at all. You notice the little details the forger includes. The small touches designed to sell the lie. A quirky and telling tidbit is the section on papal fashion. The document asserts that Constantine also gave Sylvester the imperial insignia, the right to wear the purple mantle of an emperor, to don the golden diadem, and to ride a fine white horse. It's not just about power, it's about the look, the pageantry, the status. It's a clause that essentially says the Pope can and should dress like an emperor, because, for all intents and purposes, he now is one. You have to admire the sheer nerve, for almost 700 years, This document will be accepted as truth. It will be cited in legal arguments, used to justify papal land grabs, and to assert spiritual and temporal supremacy over the crowned heads of Europe. It will become a foundation stone of papal authority during the Middle Ages. Kings will bow to its imagined legacy. It is a deception so grand, so fundamentally history-altering, that its power lies not in its truthfulness, but in its usefulness. People will believe it because it is convenient for them to believe it, or because it is too dangerous to question it. Remember the Trojans, so eager to believe the horse was a gift because the alternative was too terrifying? The donation works on a similar principle. It offers a clear, divinely ordained hierarchy in a messy, chaotic world. In the 17th century, a brilliant Italian scholar named Lorenzo Valla will finally expose it as a fraud, using philological analysis, a new and powerful tool. He will point out that the Latin vocabulary and style of the document could not possibly have come from the 13th century. He'll note historical anachronisms and impossibilities, basically performing a literary forensic analysis that proves its origins are much, much later. He exposes the lie, yet the lie has already done its work. For centuries it has shaped the destiny of nations, but all of that is in the distant future. For now, in this quiet, flickering room, the ink is drying. The scribe leans back, reads over his handiwork, and perhaps allows himself a small private smile. He has not merely recorded history. He has forged it. He has created a shadow of the truth, a ghost document that will haunt the corridors of power for longer than the Roman Empire itself ever stood. The finished parchment lies on the table, unassuming, yet pregnant with the power to crown and depose kings. Its work is just beginning. The scent of aging parchment and damp Roman stone recedes from your senses. The quiet intensity of the scriptorium gives way to a different kind of hush, one filled with the rustling of leaves and the faint, almost imperceptible scent of something sweet and strange in the air. Your journey through the shadowed corridors of history takes you backward in time once more to an era before the popes of Rome, even before the legions. You find yourself standing on a terraced slope, halfway up a mountain that scrapes the sky. You are on Mount Parnassus, in Greece, and below you, clinging to the mountainside like a swallow's nest, is the sanctuary of Delphi. The world here feels older, wilder. Sharp, gray rocks, the shining ones, jut out from the earth. Olive trees, their trunks gnarled and ancient, dot the landscape. A fresh, cool spring trickles from a cleft in the rock, its water said to possess purifying qualities. You can feel a sense of immanence here, a palpable divinity that has nothing to do with carved temple reliefs or forged documents. This place feels sacred, as if it is a point of direct contact between the mundane world of mortals and the unknowable realm of the gods. At the heart of it all is the Temple of Apollo, a stately structure of stone and marble, its entrance famously inscribed with the maxims, "Know thyself and nothing in excess." Good advice, though seemingly followed by very few of the people you've encountered on your journey so far. Teamings are fighted but few fralic some parsed fur. You are here to consult the oracle. This is the most famous, most respected, most revered source of wisdom in the ancient world. World. Kings and commoners, generals and philosophers, all make the arduous pilgrimage to this remote mountainside to pose their most desperate questions to the god Apollo. They do not speak to the god directly, of course. They speak to him through his chosen vessel, the Pythia. She is a local woman chosen for her piety and character, who holds the holiest office in the Hellenic world. She is Apollo's mouthpiece. Her words, it is said, are the very words of the god of prophecy and truth. You walk the sacred way, a winding path that snakes up through the sanctuary toward the temple. The path is lined with treasury buildings, small, temple-like structures built by various Greek city-states to house their lavish offerings to the god. They are monuments of gratitude for past prophecies, and perhaps down payments for future ones. It is a stunning display of wealth and a testament to the oracle's influence. You see statues, bronze tripods, spoils of war, a whole hillside of divine bling. This isn't just a holy site, portfolio of satisfied customers. After undergoing a series of rituals, purifying yourself in the waters of the Castalian spring, offering a sacrifice of a goat, which must tremble in just the right way to signal the god's willingness to be consulted, you are finally allowed to enter the inner sanctum of the temple, the adyton. The chamber is dark, the air thick with the smoke of burning bay leaves. It's here that the Pythia delivers her divine pronouncements. You see her, a figure half obscured by shadow and fumes, seated upon a great bronze tripod. She is not shouting prophecies to the rafters. The process is far more serene, almost meditative. She holds a branch of laurel, Apollo's sacred plant, and gazes into a bowl of spring water. It is believed that she is breathing in sweet-smelling vapors, the pneuma, that rise from a fissure in the rock beneath her. These divine fumes are what put her into a trance, opening her mind to the voice of the god. For a very long time, historians considered this tool to be a purely mythical invention. A mainstream historical fact of the first century was that there was no chasm, there were no vapors. But in the Ichenjilbite cultures, a team of geologists and archaeologists made a remarkable discovery. They found that two geological fault lines, one running east-west and the other north-south, directly beneath the ruined temple. This geological intersection could have allowed small amounts of ethylene gas, a sweet-smelling and mildly narcotic hydrocarbon, to seep up from the bedrock, inducing a state of mild euphoria and disassociation. The myth, it seems, may have had a very real geological foundation. As the question is put to her, perhaps a question of war, of colonization, of a personal dilemma, the Pythia begins to speak. But her words are not the clear, direct answers one might hope for. They are often fragmented, enigmatic, filled with poetic imagery and deliberate ambiguity. Her ravings are recorded by a priest, who then translates them into a more structured, though equally cryptic, verse. And herein lies the ultimate, unbeatable deception of Delphi. The oracle is never wrong, because the prophecies are so cleverly worded that they can be interpreted to be right, no matter what happens. It is a divine doublespeak, a masterclass in ambiguity. You think of Croesus, the fabulously wealthy king of Lydia. He famously asked the oracle if he should attack the rising Persian Empire. Fol Merxbior. The Pythia's response has become legendary. If you cross the river Halys, she pronounced, you will destroy a great empire. Croesus, ecstatic, read this as a guarantee of his own victory. He attacked and was utterly crushed by Cyrus the Great. His own Lydian empire was destroyed. The prophecy was perfectly correct, just not in the way he had assumed. The oracle had provided a shadow of the truth, allowing his own ambition to fill in the rest. It's the ultimate I told you so, delivered before the event even happens. You see how this works. The genius of Delphi is not in predicting the future, but in crafting responses that force the recipient to bear the burden of interpretation. The prophecy becomes a mirror, reflecting the questioner's own hopes, fears, and assumptions. Should I marry? The yoking of the mule will bring you ruin. Should my city go to war? The wooden wall shall not be captured. Was that the city's walls, or the wooden walls of their fleet of ships? The Athenians debated this very point before the Battle of Salamis. Another convenient success for the oracle when they chose the latter and won. The answers place all the responsibility on the mortal, while preserving the infallibility of the god. It is a system of guidance that cannot fail. It's the ancient world's equivalent of a very wise, very frustrating therapist who only ever answers your questions with more questions. Historians still argue whether the priests who interpreted the Pythia's word were consciously crafting these ambiguous answers as a form of canny political maneuvering, or if they genuinely believed they were transmitting divine but inherently mysterious truths. Were they charlatans or true believers? The answer is probably a bit of both. Over centuries, they became exceptionally skilled diplomats, balancing the requests of rival city-states, dispensing advice that was just vague enough to avoid offense, and just wise enough to seem profound. Their greatest skill was in risk management for both themselves and for the God they served. As you leave the sanctuary, making your way back down the mountainside, you carry with you not a clear answer, but a sense of profound mystery. Your journey through the great deceptions of the ancient world is complete. You have stood on the shores of Troy and watched a city welcome its own doom in the form of a gift. You have seen a pharaoh spin a near-catastrophic failure into a tale of personal, divine heroism for the ages. You have witnessed the forging of a document that would grant an empire to a spiritual leader, built on a lie of miraculous healing. And now you have breathed the sacred air of Delphi, where truth itself was a carefully constructed, beautiful, and utterly unprovable commodity. Each of these deceptions, you realize, worked because people wanted to believe. The Trojans wanted peace. The Egyptians wanted a heroic king. The medieval papacy wanted a divine right to rule. And everyone wanted guidance from the gods. The truth can be messy, disappointing, or dangerous. But a good story, a convincing lie, a shadowy echo of the truth that can build cities, create dynasties, and shape the course of history for thousands of years. As the sun sets behind the peaks of Parnassus, you reflect that perhaps the line between a great deception and a powerful truth is sometimes no thicker than a single fir plank, a chisel mark on stone, or a wisp of sweet-smelling vapor rising from the earth. Crown of serpents, a history of deadly queens. Your story begins in a place of harsh light and long shadows. A kingdom, finding its feet on the world stage. You are in Pella, the burgeoning capital of Macedon. This is not the refined, sun-drenched marble of Athens. The air here is sharper, carrying the scent of wood smoke, wet earth, and the metallic tang of ambition. The palace is a grand structure, but it feels more like a fortress than a residence, built for a king who is more comfortable in a battle camp than on a throne. The sounds are rougher too, not the delicate notes of a lyre, but the clatter of soldiers' boots on stone, the boisterous laughter of generals, the nickering of horses being groomed in the courtyards below. It is a place of raw, masculine energy, a kingdom forged by the spear. At the center of this world, though often absent, is its creator, King Philip II. He is a man of immense appetites and ferocious genius, a military innovator who has transformed the Macedonian army into the most formidable fighting force of its time. He is a master diplomat, a prodigious drinker, a man with a scarred face, and a body that bears the testament of a dozen battles. He is power incarnate, and, as is the custom for Macedonian kings, he is a prolific husband. He collects wives as he collects victories, taking new princesses from conquered or allied lands to cement his power. Each marriage is a political act, and each new wife brings with her the potential for a new heir. This creates, within the stone walls of the palace, a quiet, simmering war of its own. And then there is you, watching a woman who moves through this gruff, martial court like a panther in a dog kennel. She is Queen Olympias, Philip's fourth wife, and she is nothing like the others. She is from Epirus, a land to the west considered half wild by the more cosmopolitan Greeks. She possesses a fiery, untamable spirit and an intense, brooding beauty. But it is her devotion to ancient mystery cults that sets her apart, that cloaks her in an aura of both fascination and fear. While the men are dedicated to the public gods of war and the state, Olympias finds her solace in the primal, ecstatic rites of Dionysus. She is a devotee, a mystic, a woman who understands that there is power in the unseen world. Her reputation precedes her everywhere she goes. It is whispered that she handles serpents, that she sleeps with them coiled beside her on her bed. For her, these are not creatures of menace, but sacred animals, symbols of rebirth and divine connection. But for the court at Pella, a group of men more comfortable with a spear than with symbolism, this is deeply unsettling. They see her not as devout, but as exotic, unstable, and dangerous. Her affinity for snakes is just one piece of the puzzle that makes her so alien to them. The 3rd century BC equivalent of bringing a very intense and esoteric hobby to a company potluck. Her focus, her entire world, is her son. A boy with his father's ambition and his mother's burning intensity, the young Alexander. In the precarious world of the Macedonian court, a prince is only as safe as his mother's influence is strong. With Philip constantly away on campaign, often returning with a new bride and a new set of political obligations, Olympias knows that Alexander's claim to the throne is fragile. She must fight for him not with swords, but with influence, perception, and a will of iron. To secure her son's legacy, she employs a strategy of divine marketing. She cultivates a story, a rumor that takes on the weight of legend. Philip, she hints, is not Alexander's true father. The boy's sire is far more grand. She speaks of a night when a thunderbolt fell from the sky, of a dream where the god Zeus himself came to her bed, disguised as a great serpent. Alexander, therefore, is not merely the son of a king, but a demigod, a son of the king of the gods. It is a breathtakingly audacious claim, a masterpiece of maternal propaganda. It elevates her son above all other potential heirs, wrapping him in a cloak of divine destiny. It also, conveniently, explains her own affinity for snakes. She isn't just an eccentric, she is the chosen consort of a god. This is the strange, charged atmosphere in which you find yourself. A boy prince with mismatched eyes, tutored by the great Aristotle himself, is told he is descended from both Achilles on his father's side and Zeus on his mother's. It's quite a resume for a teenager to live up to, and you watch his mother, Olympias, maneuver through the court, her every action a calculated move to protect and promote him. But her carefully constructed world is shattered. One day when Philip returns from a campaign and takes a new 7th wife. This is not just another foreign princess for political expediency. She is Cleopatra Eurydice, a high-born Macedonian noblewoman. For Olympias, this is the ultimate threat. A Macedonian wife could produce a pure-blooded Macedonian heir, sidelining her own half-Epirotes son. At the wedding feast, the bride's uncle, a general named Attalus, stands to offer a toast. Drunk and emboldened, he prays aloud that the union might produce a legitimate successor to the throne. Alexander, incensed, throws his goblet, shouting, "Do I seem a bastard to you?" Philip, also deep in his cups, draws his sword and lunges at his son, only to trip over a couch and collapse in a heap. It's a humiliating family drama that lays the stakes bare for everyone to see. Alexander and Olympias flee into exile. Though they eventually return to Pella, the damage is done. The rift is deep and unforgiving. Then, in the year Sambite Centralup BC, comes the moment that changes everything. Philip is at the pinnacle of his power, celebrating the wedding of his daughter in the old capital of Aegae. The air is festive. The grand theater is packed. Philip enters, clad in a brilliant white robe, his bodyguards held at a distance to show his people that he is one of them. In that moment of choreographed vulnerability, one of his own royal bodyguards, a man named Pausanias, rushes forward and drives a dagger deep into the king's side. Philip falls, and the history of the world pivots on its axis. The assassin is swiftly killed by the other guards, his motives dying with him. And here, in the bloody aftermath, the whispers turn back to the Serpent Queen. Historians still argue whether Olympias was the mastermind behind her husband's assassination. There is no smoking gun, no deathbed confession. Her accusers point to her undeniable motive. With Philip gone, her son Alexander would be king. They note her exile, her public humiliation, her ferocious ambition. Asanias, the assassin, had his own personal grievances against Philip, but could he have been a pawn in her much larger game? Olympias's supporters argue she was simply the beneficiary of a convenient tragedy, her name smeared by enemies who feared her power. Whatever the truth, her actions in the days that followed are chillingly clear. With Alexander proclaimed king, Olympias moves not with the grief of a widow, but with the cold, reptilian certainty of a predator clearing the board. Her rival, the young queen Cleopatra Eurydice, had recently given birth to a baby girl, a potential future threat. Olympias storms the apartments where the new mother and child are kept. The accounts are grim. She is said to have had the infant murdered before the mother's eyes. Some say by burning the room. Others say she was thrown into a fire. She then presents the grieving Cleopatra Eurydice with a choice of 3 items: a rope, a dagger, or a cup of poison. The young queen, a pawn in a game she could never win, chooses the rope. There is no ambiguity here. This is not rumor or divine legend. It is an act of brutal, calculated elimination. She has secured the crown for her son, bathing its foundations in the blood of her rivals. You watch as Alexander, now uncontested king of Macedon, prepares to embark on the conquests that will make his name echo through eternity. But behind the legend of Alexander the Great stands the formidable shadow of the woman who birthed him, who told him he was a god, and who ruthlessly carved his path to power. The Serpent Queen has ensured her son's destiny, and the world will tremble before him. Section R. The bloody, brutalist court of Macedon fades into memory. The echoes of Olympias's ruthlessness, the cries of her victims, are carried on the winds of time, drifting south and east across the great expanse of the Mediterranean. 3 centuries pass in the blink of your mind's eye. The world that Alexander the Great forged has been fractured and remade. His vast empire was carved up by his generals after his death, their descendants creating dynasties that now, themselves, are showing the fraying signs of age. The raw, ambitious power of Macedon has been replaced by the organized, inexorable might of a new superpower. Rome, you are no longer in a land of sharp mountains and cold rivers, but one of flat, fertile earth and suffocating heat. You find yourself gliding down the silty, life-giving artery of the Nile, towards the greatest city in the known world, Alexandria. It rises from the coastline, like a dream of marble and light. This is the jewel of the dynasty founded by Ptolemy I Soter, one of Alexander's own generals. At the mouth of the harbor, the legendary Pharos Lighthouse, one of the wonders of the ancient world, casts its beam across the water, a beacon of learning and commerce. This city is everything Pella was not, a shimmering metropolis, a crucible of cultures where Egyptian priests, Greek scholars, Jewish merchants, and Roman administrators walk the same sun-bleached avenues. Tut states core. It is the home of the Great Library, the largest repository of knowledge on earth. The air smells of spice, sea salt, papyrus, and money, yet beneath this glittering surface you sense a deep anxiety. The Ptolemaic kingdom is in a state of genteel decline. It has become a client state of Rome, immensely wealthy but politically neutered. Its survival depends entirely on the goodwill of Roman senators and the shifting tides of their ferocious internal politics. And in the royal palace, a family drama is unfolding that mirrors the decay of the kingdom itself. A young queen is locked in a bitter power struggle with her even younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, to whom she is married, following the unsettling royal Egyptian tradition. It is a court ruled by schemers, a manipulative eunuch, a corrupt general, who see the royal siblings as mere pawns in their own games. And then you see her? She is Cleopatra VII Philopator. Her name will one day become shorthand for seduction, a synonym for exotic, home-wrecking beauty. But the woman you see is far more complex, far more formidable than the caricature she will become. The first thing you notice is not her beauty, which by all accounts was not her most striking feature, but her intelligence. You see it in her eyes, a sharp, appraising light that misses nothing. She was raised in the shadow of the great library, educated by the finest minds of the Hellenistic world, and she possessed a quirky, almost unheard-of skill for a Ptolemaic ruler. She took the time to learn the language of the people she ruled. For 300 years, her Greek-speaking dynasty had held itself apart from their Egyptian subjects. Cleopatra was the first to speak their tongue, along with the languages of Parthians, Hebrews, Medes, and half a dozen others. She understood that language is a key that can unlock loyalty, that respect is a currency as valuable as gold. Her situation, however, is desperate. She has been driven out of Alexandria by her brother's powerful advisors, shept powerfully, forced into exile in the deserts to the east. Her kingdom, her throne, her life, all hang by a thread. But a new player has just arrived in Egypt, a man who holds the fate of the world in his hands, Julius Caesar. He has come to Alexandria, not as a tourist, but in pursuit of his defeated rival, Pompey the Great. Upon arrival, he was presented with a ghastly welcoming gift from young Ptolemy's advisors, Pompey's severed head. They thought this would please Caesar. They misjudged their man catastrophically. Caesar was disgusted by the murder of a Roman consul, and he quickly established himself in the royal palace, becoming the unwilling but ultimate arbiter of the Egyptian civil war. Cleopatra knows this is her chance. She must get to Caesar. She cannot fight her way back into the city, so she resolves to sneak in. This leads to one of the most famous entrance scenes in history. With the help of a loyal attendant named Apollodorus the Sicilian, Cleopatra is wrapped and bound within a roll of bedding. Some accounts say a fine carpet, utilitarian linen sack. She is then smuggled into the harbor on a small fishing skiff. The bundle containing the Queen of Egypt is unceremoniously slung over Apollodorus' shoulder and carried past her brother's guards directly into the private quarters where Caesar is working. Modern delivery services could learn a thing or two about this level of access. You watch as the bundle is unfurled at the Roman general's feet, and out spills not just a queen, but a proposition. This was not the act of a desperate woman begging for help. It was an act of supreme confidence and breathtaking political theater. She was presenting herself as a hidden treasure, a valuable prize smuggled right under her enemies' noses. She correctly gambled that a man like Caesar, a master of the bold and unexpected gesture himself, would appreciate the sheer audacity of her arrival. In that moment, she bypasses all the hostile intermediaries, all the plotting eunuchs and generals, and presents her case directly to the only man whose opinion mattered. Their alliance is forged almost instantly. It is a meeting of two of the sharpest minds of their time. He is a 52-year-old Roman patrician at the height of his power, Haverconci. She is a 21-year-old Hellenistic queen with the ambition of her famous Macedonian ancestor. Of course, a physical relationship follows, and a son, Caesarion, is born from their union. And here, in this alliance, you can sense the sheer scale of Cleopatra's ambition. Remember how Olympias sought to legitimize Alexander? By claiming he was the son of a god? Cleopatra is doing something even more radical. By bearing Caesar's son, she is creating a living link between the divine royalty of Egypt and the temporal power of Rome. Her son, Ptolemy Caesar, represents a possible future, a new kind of empire where East and West are united not by conquest, but by bloodline. Historians still argue whether the legendary love affairs of Cleopatra, first with Caesar and later with Mark Antony, were born of genuine passion, or were acts of purely political calculation. Was she a romantic, risking everything for love in a hostile world? Or was she a cold, pragmatic politician using her body and her charm as her most effective weapons. In a desperate bid for survival and power for her son? She poses a false choice. For a woman like Cleopatra, in her position, love and politics could never truly be separate. Survival and affection were likely woven together so tightly that not even she could say where one ended and the other began. For a brief, shining moment, her plan seems to work. Caesar crushes her brother's forces at the Battle of the Nile. Ptolemy XIII drowns in the river. Weighted down by his own golden armor, Cleopatra is installed firmly as the ruler of Egypt. She even makes a trip to Rome, living in one of Caesar's villas, scandalizing the Roman aristocracy. She is the serpent on the Nile, coiled and powerful, her future seemingly guaranteed by her connection to the most powerful man on earth. But then, on the Ides of March in Circeus BC, the daggers come out in the Roman Senate. Julius Caesar is assassinated. Her protector, her partner, the father of her child is gone. The foundation of her global ambition is shattered. A new power vacuum explodes in Rome, one that will inevitably pull her and her rich kingdom into its vortex. You see her in Alexandria, holding her young son's hand, looking out over the great harbor. She has outmaneuvered her family, she has dazzled a Roman dictator, and she has secured her crown. But now, with Caesar dead, the game board has been overturned once again. She is no longer allied with the master of the world, but is merely a wealthy outsider watching as a new pack of wolves begins to fight over his legacy. The serpent must choose who to bite and who to charm next. The balmy Mediterranean air of Alexandria, tinged with the promise and peril of Rome, slowly cools and thins. The world of Greek philosophy, Roman legions, and Ptolemaic court intrigue dissolves. You drift across continents and through centuries, propelled eastward on the currents of time. Nearly 700 years pass you by before you alight. You land in a place of stunning, almost severe, beauty and rigid, unbreachable tradition. You are now in China, during the brilliant Tang dynasty. You find yourself standing within the sprawling, magnificent palace complex at Chang'an, a city that was, at its zenith, the most populous and sophisticated metropolis on Earth. It is a city of broad, straight avenues laid out in a perfect grid, of soaring pagodas with gracefully curved roofs, and of lush gardens designed for quiet contemplation. The silence here is different from the expectant hush of Delphi or the uneasy quiet of a Roman scriptorium. This is a silence born of order, of a society built upon layers of intricate ceremony and unquestionable hierarchy. Every bow, every gesture, every mode of address is prescribed and freighted with meaning, and at the apex of this exquisitely structured world sits the Son of Heaven, the Emperor. But the story you are here to witness is not about the Emperor. It is about a woman who begins her life at the very lowest rung of the imperial ladder and ends it on the dragon throne itself. Her journey will require a level of patience, foresight, and utter ruthlessness that would make even a pragmatist like Olympias take notes. You are drawn to the inner court, the world of the women. This is a realm of breathtaking beauty, filled with silk robes, carved jade ornaments, and the delicate scent of plum blossoms. But beneath the perfumed surface, it is a gilded cage, a place of intense, whispered competition. Here, hundreds, sometimes thousands of women, wives, concubines, and servants, vie for a single prize, the emperor's favor. His attention is the only source of power they can ever hope to have. A fleeting glance can elevate a woman, while a moment of neglect can doom her to a lifetime of lonely obscurity. Into this world, at the age of just 14, you see a young girl named Wu Zhao arrive. She is from a respectable aristocratic family, well educated for a girl of her time, and possessing a striking intelligence. She is made a Karen, a concubine of the 5th rank, essentially a mid-level employee in the vast enterprise of the imperial bedchamber. The reigning emperor is the great Taizong, one of the most capable and revered rulers in Chinese history. He notices the young Wu Zhao, but she fails to become one of his favorites. She is perhaps too sharp, too observant for a monarch seeking simple comforts. Her quiet, almost unnerving ambition is revealed in a quirky and telling anecdote from this period. One day, the emperor was admiring his famously spirited warhorse, a magnificent creature named Lion Stallion that no one could tame. He asked his retinue for their thoughts. As experienced courtiers and ministers demurred, the young Wu Zhao stepped forward. She said she could master the horse, but she would need 3 things: an iron whip, an iron mace, and a dagger. First, she would lash it with the whip. If it refused to submit, she would strike its head with the mace. And if it still refused, she explained with unnerving calm, she would cut its throat with the dagger. The Emperor Taizong was reportedly taken aback, impressed by her boldness, but also chilled by her brutality. She was not promoted. Her career, it seemed, was stalled before it had even begun. As Emperor Taizong grew old and sick, Wu Zhao made the most important and most dangerous gamble of her life. She was assigned to his care, and during this time she caught the eye of the crown prince, Li Zhi. Against all propriety, against all rules of filial piety and courtly conduct, a secret relationship blossomed between the emperor's concubine and his heir. It was a treacherous path, but it was her only lifeline, for she knew what awaited the childless concubines of a deceased emperor: a one-way ticket to a Buddhist nunnery to live out their remaining years in pious obscurity. Wretched. And so when Taizong died, that is exactly what happened. Wu Zhao had her head shaved, donned the drab robes of a nun, and was sent to the Ganye temple. For any other woman, this would have been the final chapter. But for Wu Zhao, it was merely an intermission. While the Serpent Queen Olympias acted with swift, hot-blooded fury, and Cleopatra deployed dramatic, high-stakes theater, Wu Zhao's great weapon was patience. She waited, and in the palace, her secret paramour, now the reigning Emperor Gaozong, was having problems of his own. His primary wife, Empress Wang, was locked in a bitter struggle for his affection with his favorite consort, a woman known as the pure concubine Xiao. Empress Wang, childless and losing her husband's interest, grew desperate. Remembering the emperor's youthful infatuation with the clever nun from his father's court, Dan Fangping, she decided to make a catastrophic political miscalculation. In a bid to divert the emperor's attention away from consort Xiao, Empress Wang arranged to have Wu Zhao recalled from the monastery and brought back to the palace. She thought she was bringing in a temporary distraction. In reality, she had just unlocked the tiger's cage. Wu Zhao returned to the court not as the naive 14-year-old she once was, Shexins, but as a seasoned patient strategist. Within an astonishingly short time, she had completely captivated the emperor. She sidelined not only consort Xiao but also Empress Wang herself, becoming Gaozong's most cherished companion and confidante. Her ascent was meteoric. Then came the act that would cement her reputation and pave her path to ultimate power. She gave birth to a daughter. One day, Empress Wang paid a visit to the nursery to see the infant. She played with the child for a while, and then she left. A short time later, when Emperor Gaozong came to see his new daughter, Wu Zhao greeted him with feigned delight, only to pull back the blankets and reveal the baby was dead, apparently smothered. She fell into hysterics, pointing the finger of blame directly at the last person who had visited the child. Empress Wang, the heartbroken emperor, seeing his dead child and his distraught love, believed her. This is the dark heart of Wu Zhao's story, and historians still argue whether she committed this most monstrous of acts. And did she truly murder her own infant daughter in cold blood, a diabolical move to frame her rival? Or was the child's death a terrible accident, what we might now call sudden infant death syndrome, that a quick-thinking Wu Zhao immediately and brilliantly exploited? Or could Empress Wang, jealous and desperate, have actually committed the crime? We will never know. But like the hollow gift horse at Troy, the convenient story was what mattered. Wu Zhao's version became the accepted truth within the palace walls. Empress Wang was deposed, along with her ally consort Xiao. Wu Zhao, the former low-level concubine, the exiled nun, was elevated to the rank of empress. Her victory was total, but her vengeance was not yet complete. She had the two women imprisoned. Later accounts, written by her detractors, claim that when the emperor showed signs of pitying them, Wu had their hands and feet cut off and had them thrown into large vats of wine, telling her servants that they could now get drunk to their bones. It was an act of final, absolute elimination. With her rivals gone, Empress Wu became the true power behind the throne. This is a mainstream historical fact beyond dispute, as Emperor Gaozong began to suffer from a series of strokes that left him debilitated and nearly blind. She began to attend to imperial matters, seated behind a screen just behind the dragon throne. Soon the screen was removed, and she ruled openly alongside him, the two sages governing China together. She proved to be a remarkably competent ruler, skilled in politics, ruthless with her enemies, but also a patron of scholarship and a capable administrator. When Gaozong finally died, her hold on power was absolute. She placed two of her sons on the throne in succession, but they were emperors in name only. She ruled as Empress Dowager and Regent, deposing one son and placing the other under effective house arrest when he showed any sign of independence. She established a network of secret police to root out any opposition within the powerful clans of the court, unleashing a reign of terror that solidified her control. For years she reigned the undisputed master of China. But this was not enough. In the year Labai Cholzhers, at the age of Liu Shiti, she took the final unprecedented step. She deposed her son, declared the Tang dynasty to be over, and founded her own new dynasty, the Zhou. She then ascended the throne not as a regent or a consort, but as the supreme ruler. For she adopted the title Huangdi, Emperor, the one and only woman in more than 3,000 years of Chinese history to ever hold that title. The girl from the back rooms of the harem had become the son of heaven. Section. So the severe, magnificent order of imperial China begins to dissolve. The scent of plum blossom and cold ambition gives way to the smells of a different world. Damp Parisian stone, aristocratic perfume mingled with the unwashed odors of a crowded city, and the ever-present metallic undertone of spilt blood. You have traveled forward now through nearly 900 years of history, arriving in a kingdom that is tearing itself apart. You are in Jeerlook century France, and it is a place of beautiful castles and brutal, unrelenting violence. You find yourself in the heart of the Valois court, a world of shifting allegiances, extravagant fashions, and deep, irreconcilable religious division. The Protestant Reformation has shattered the centuries-old unity of Christendom, and its shockwaves are tearing through the French nobility. The kingdom is split between the dominant Catholics, led by the powerful and ambitious Guise family, and the rising Huguenots, the French Protestants, spearheaded by noble houses like the Bourbons and the Montmorencys. It is a struggle for faith that has become inextricably, bloodily entangled with a struggle for political power. At the center of this maelstrom sits the royal family, trying desperately to hold the fractured nation together. And into this viper's nest, many years earlier, a young girl had arrived. She was an outsider, a Florentine shopkeeper's daughter, as her snobbish new countrymen would dismissively call her. Her name was Catherine de' Medici. She was an orphan, a great niece of a pope, and a fabulously wealthy heiress from the legendary banking family of Florence. She was brought to France at the age of 14 to marry the second son of the king, to marry a sullen boy named Henry. Her marriage was a financial and political calculation, but for Catherine herself, it was a profoundly lonely and insecure beginning. Remember Wu Zhao entering the Forbidden City as a low-level concubine? Catherine's arrival as a royal duchess was grander, but her position was, In its own way, just as precarious, for the first decade of her marriage she produced no children, a failure that threatened her with repudiation and disgrace. While her husband, who would become King Henry II, was alive, he offered her little affection, preferring the company of his luminous and influential mistress, Diane de Poitiers. Catherine was tolerated, but she was not powerful. She had to learn the skills of a survivor, to be patient, to watch, to listen, and to conceal her own thoughts and ambitions behind a quiet, unassuming facade. She learned the rhythms of the French court, understood its factions, and bided her time. Then, in a shocking turn of events, her husband, King Henry II, was killed during a jousting tournament. A splinter from his opponent's lance pierced his eye, and he died after days of agony. This horrific accident, like the assassination of Philip of Macedon, vaulted a queen from the political sidelines to the centre of power. Catherine's eldest son, Francis II, became king, and Catherine became Queen Mother, the shadowy matriarch of a nation on the brink of civil war. She would spend the next 3 decades of her life fighting to preserve the French crown for her 3 sons, all of whom would reign, and all of whom were frail, flawed, or simply unequal to the ferocious challenges of their time. And here, in this unending crisis, you see the core of Catherine's strategy. Unlike Cleopatra, who sought to forge a new world order, or Wu Zetian, who seized ultimate power for herself, Catherine's ambition was, in its way, more maternal, more protective. She was a dynastic survivalist, a political lioness trying to guard her sickly cubs from the ravenous packs of nobles tearing at the kingdom. She maneuvered, she schemed, she compromised, and when necessary, she unleashed a cold, calculated ruthlessness that earned her the moniker the Serpent Queen. Her favored method was not the open battlefield or the executioner's axe, but the subtler arts of statecraft. She was a master of political theater, throwing magnificent, ruinously expensive court festivals and spectacles designed to project an image of royal power and unity, even as the country was disintegrating. A quirky tidbit of her courtly life was her creation of the Flying Squadron, a group of her most beautiful and intelligent maids of honor, whom she would deploy at court functions. They were tasked with using their charm and wit to gather secrets from the powerful men of the court, promend, to report on their allegiances and to gently influence their opinions. They were an elegant, perfumed network of spies, a testament to Catherine's understanding that in a world of whispers and plots, information was the most valuable weapon. But as the French wars of religion intensified, her balancing act grew more desperate, and it culminated in the event that would forever stain her name. The year is Echen Wubite Tisharar. Catherine has just orchestrated a marriage that she hopes will finally bring peace to France. Her Catholic daughter, Margaret of Valois, is to be married to the leading Huguenot prince, Henry of Navarre. It is meant to be a great act of reconciliation. The leading Huguenot nobles from all over France flock to Catholic Paris for the wedding celebrations. The city is tense, packed with armed men from both factions, and then, just days after the wedding, an assassination attempt is made on the Huguenot leader, Admiral Gaspard de Coligny. He is wounded but not killed. Panic grips the Huguenot nobility, and a furious desire for revenge ripples through their ranks. The Catholic faction, led by the Duke of Guise, fears a Protestant uprising. The peace that Catherine had worked so hard to build has shattered in this moment of extreme crisis. Catherine huddles with her son, King Charles IX, and her closest advisors. The accounts of what happens next are frantic, contradictory, and clouded by centuries of propaganda. The decision is made to launch a preemptive strike to assassinate Coligny and a small handful of other key Huguenot leaders before they can organize their revenge. It is a desperate, bloody gamble meant to decapitate the Protestant leadership and restore order. But it spirals out of control once the killing begins in the pre-dawn hours of August Artisith. On St. Bartholomew's Day, it does not stop. The signal of the palace bell ignites the pent-up religious hatred of the Parisian mobs. What was meant to be a surgical strike becomes a horrific, city-wide massacre. For 3 days, the streets of Paris run with blood as thousands of Huguenots, men, women, and children, are hunted down and slaughtered by their Catholic neighbors. The violence spreads to other parts of France, continuing for weeks. Historians still argue about the depth of Catherine's culpability in the saint. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. Was she the cold-hearted architect of a premeditated slaughter, luring the Huguenots to Paris with a sham wedding in order to exterminate them? This was the version of the story eagerly spread by her Protestant enemies throughout Europe, casting her as an Italian she-devil, a disciple of Machiavelli who specialized in poison and deceit. Or was she a panicked leader who made a reckless decision in a moment of extreme duress, a decision whose horrific, unintended consequences she could never have foreseen? The truth likely lies somewhere in that murky middle ground. She almost certainly approved the initial assassinations, but it's highly doubtful she intended the popular butchery that followed. Regardless, the blood of Saint Bartholomew's would cling to her legacy forever. In the aftermath, you see her, the eternal survivor, continuing her work. Her son Charles IX, haunted to his grave by the massacre he authorized, would die less than 2 years later. Her third son, Henry III, would inherit the throne. Catherine would continue to advise him, to plot, to try and steer the ship of state through the storm. She was a creature of the shadows, her power rooted not in divine claims or military conquest, but in an exhaustive, intimate knowledge of her enemies and a tireless dedication to her family's survival. Her association with poisons and shadowy dealings, while likely exaggerated by her enemies, reflected the truth of her methods. She preferred the subtle maneuver to the grand gesture, the secret negotiation to the open declaration. Your journey through the lives of these deadly queens comes to an end. From the mystic, snake-handling matriarch of Macedon, to the brilliant political actress on the Nile, to the patient, methodical empress of China, and finally to the tireless dynastic defender in a fractured France, you have seen the many forms that female power could take in a world built by and for men. These women were not simple villains. They were complex, brilliant, and utterly ruthless survivors. They were mothers, wives, and rulers who wielded intrigue like a weapon and ambition like a shield, each leaving a trail of both awe and blood in their wake, forever crowned as the serpents of history, an empire of blunders, when stupidity commanded armies. You know, your journey tonight does not begin in a grand palace or on a storied battlefield of heroes. Instead, it starts with a simple, trudging rhythm and an overwhelming sense of heat. You find yourself marching in the vast, disciplined column of a Roman legion, but the familiar landscapes of Italy or Gaul are nowhere to be seen. You are in the east, in Mesopotamia, and the sun is a merciless white-hot disk in a pale, dusty sky. With every step, your sandals kick up a fine, choking powder that coats your tongue and grinds in your teeth. The air is so dry it seems to crackle. To your left and right, thousands of your fellow legionaries march in near silence, their faces grim, their heavy wool tunics dark with sweat. The rhythmic thud of their hobnailed sandals on the baked earth is the only sound, a monotonous metronome counting out the slow demise of an army. This entire enterprise feels wrong, and at the heart of that feeling is the man who leads you. Wisturi, the man riding somewhere ahead on a fine horse, cushioned from the dust by a cloud of attendants. His name is Marcus Licinius Crassus. Crassus is a man of immense significance in Rome. He is a member of the first triumvirate, sharing power with the military prodigy Pompey the Great and the political genius Julius Caesar. But Crassus's genius is of a different sort. He is not a soldier or a statesman. He is a businessman. In fact, he is arguably the richest man in Roman history, and his methods for acquiring that wealth were, shall we say, uniquely creative. A mainstream historical fact often repeated about him is that he organized Rome's first private fire brigade. The quirky tidbit, however, lies in how it operated. When a building in the densely packed city caught fire, Crassus and his crew would rush to the scene. But instead of putting out the fire, he would begin to negotiate with the terrified weeping owner, haggling to buy the burning building, and sometimes the neighboring properties threatened by the flames, for a ludicrously low price. Only after the deal was struck and the deeds were signed would his well-trained firefighters swing into action. It was a business model built on disaster, making him the ancient world's most predatory real estate developer. And it is this man, whose chief talent lies in profiting from the misfortunes of others, who now seeks a different kind of profit, military glory. He looks at his partners in power, Pompey and Caesar, and he sees what he lacks. They have triumphs, military parades where they ride through the streets of Rome acclaimed as heroes, their victories expanding the Crassus just has money, piles and piles of it, and so, fueled by a deep-seated insecurity, he has decided to purchase his own war. He has set his sights on the Parthian Empire, a mysterious and wealthy kingdom far to the east. There has been no provocation, no threat to Roman interests. This campaign is nothing more than a colossal vanity project, an old billionaire's midlife crisis played out with 40,000 lives. And the blunders began before you even left Roman territory. As you marched through Syria, you were met by an ally, the king of Armenia, a man named Artavasdes. He had ridden to meet Crassus with an offer of 6,000 elite cavalrymen and some very sound advice. He urged your general to take a northern route through the mountains of Armenia. The terrain there, he explained, was unsuitable for the Parthians' greatest military asset, their cavalry. The hills would offer protection for your legions, supplies would be plentiful, and the Armenians would guard your flank. It was a safe, sensible, and logical plan, Crassus, puffed up with arrogance, scoffed at the idea. A detour? He was Marcus Licinius Crassus. He would not skulk through mountains. He would take the direct route, the shortcut straight across the desert, to the heart of the enemy kingdom. The Armenian king, his advice scornfully rejected, politely bowed, took his 6,000 elite cavalrymen, and went home. Your army, now stripped of its own vital cavalry screen, trudged on into the wasteland, following a general who had just mistaken caution for cowardice. You can almost hear him thinking, how hard can it be? Famous last words for many an overconfident leader. Now you are deep in that desert, and the true nature of the enemy you are marching to face becomes horribly clear. The Parthians are not like the Gauls or the other tribes the legions have previously crushed. Their army is composed almost entirely of horsemen. First, there are the cataphracts, nobles clad head to toe in shimmering scale armor, their horses equally protected. They are like medieval knights, a charging wall of iron armed with long, heavy lances. But far more numerous and far more terrifying are the horse archers, tens of thousands of them, lightly equipped, riding swift ponies. They are masters of the Parthian shot, the unnerving ability to fire accurately with their powerful composite bows while galloping away from their target. Against this fluid, mobile force, the Roman legion is a rock, powerful, solid, but terribly, terribly slow. And here, in this vast flat oven of a landscape, there is nowhere to hide. You look out at the shimmering heat haze on the horizon, and then you see it. Not a solid line of infantry, but a rising cloud of dust. The Parthian army appears not as a single body, but as a swarm, enveloping your column. Crassus, seeing his army about to be surrounded, makes his fatal tactical decision. Instead of trying to punch through, he orders the legions to form a massive, hollow square. It's a defensive formation, meant to present a wall of shields and spears to the enemy in every direction. It's also the ancient world's largest and most conveniently stationary target. A thunderous, terrifying sound fills the air. Not horns or shouts, but the rhythmic, booming cadence of huge kettle drums carried by the Parthians. It's a sound designed to unsettle, to create panic. Then the attack begins. But it's not a glorious charge. But the horse archers just circle, staying tantalizingly out of javelin range, pouring an endless, shrieking rain of arrows into your massive, densely packed square. The large Roman shields, the famous scuda, can block some, but the arrows come from all sides, arcing high over the front ranks to fall on the men packed in the center. Every volley finds a home in flesh. There is nothing for the legionaries to do but stand, endure, and die. Crassus's young and valiant son, Publius, commanding the small Roman cavalry force, can take it no more. He leads a desperate charge to drive the archers away. The Parthians feign a retreat, luring him far from the main body of the army. It is a classic tactic, and Publius falls for it completely. The horse archers then turn, surrounding his detachment, while the colossal cataphracts emerge from the dust to smash into his exhausted ranks. The charge is annihilated. A short while later, a great cheer goes up from the Parthian lines. They ride closer, and they are carrying something aloft on a spear. It is the head of Publius Crassus. The sight breaks your army's morale. It breaks old Crassus himself. His will, his arrogance, his entire glorious campaign. It all evaporates in that moment of paternal horror. Historians still argue about the precise details of what followed, how long the legionaries held out, the exact chain of command as it disintegrated, but the outcome was brutally simple. The Roman army, one of the largest ever to march east, was systematically destroyed at the Battle of Carrhae. Crassus himself was killed during a subsequent parley, a meeting for a truce that the Parthians had no intention of honoring. And legend, perhaps too neat to be true but too fitting to be forgotten, claims that the Parthian king had molten gold poured down the throat of Crassus's severed head. A final, macabre commentary on the all-consuming greed that had led your army to this dusty, ignominious grave. You are one of the few survivors, a ghost wandering a battlefield of blunders, forever haunted by the memory of a rich man's folly, called the memory of the scorching Mesopotamian sun and the shrieking Parthian arrows. Fades, like a fever dream receding with the dawn. The taste of dust is washed from your mouth, replaced by the cool, damp salt of a northern sea. You have drifted through time and space, leaving the dying embers of the Roman Republic behind, to find yourself in the full, glorious, and often bizarre reality of the Roman Empire. About 90 years have passed. Your legionary uniform feels heavier now, the wool perpetually damp. You are standing on a beach on the northern coast of Gaul, near the place that will one day be called Boulogne. The sky is a sheet of leaden gray. Bois Foncherel. The sea is a restless, churning expanse of milky green and slate, heaving and sighing against a shore of pale sand and shingle. The air is chilly, carrying the cries of gulls and the faint, briny smell of low tide. Before you, assembled in perfect parade ground order, is a massive Roman army. 40, maybe 50,000 men. The legions have marched all the way here from Rome, a colossal undertaking of logistics and endurance, all for a single, declared purpose: to cross that choppy channel of water and invade the mysterious, mist-shrouded island of Britannia. This is not a fool's errand like Crassus's Parthian adventure. This is a serious military objective. The soldiers around you are professionals, their faces weathered, their bodies hardened by years of training. They are ready. The transport ships of the classes Britannica, the Roman fleet, are visible just offshore. All that is needed is the order. And that order must come from the Emperor himself, who is here with you now. He is not a greedy, insecure old man like Crassus. He is young, in his late 20s, and he wields a power that Crassus could only have dreamed of. He is an absolute monarch, a living god. His name is Gaius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, but he is known to history by the nickname his father's soldiers gave him, when he was a toddler waddling around the army camps in a miniature uniform. Caligula, little boot. He stands now on a specially constructed platform, looking out at the sea, a slight figure against the immense, indifferent backdrop of nature. After months of preparation and this epic march across an entire continent, the moment of climax has arrived. Trumpets sound, their bronze notes sharp in the damp air. Centurions bellow commands that ripple down the ranks. Every legionary stands ready, gripping his javelin, his eyes fixed on the misty silhouette of the British coast. They expect the command to advance, to board the ships, to begin the great invasion. Instead, Caligula gives an order of such bewildering strangeness that it seems, for a moment, as though the entire army has misheard him. The order is not to attack Britain, it is to attack the sea. You watch, your mind struggling to process the scene. As the disciplined ranks break, the front lines of the world's most powerful military force charge into the surf, their swords drawn. They splash into the frothing waves, stabbing and slashing at the water as if it were a living foe. Other soldiers hurl their heavy pila, their javelins, into the oncoming tide. It is a spectacle of supreme, magnificent pointlessness. The might of Rome, the force that had conquered the known world, has been deployed to engage in a shouting match with the English Channel. Neptune, the god of the sea, was presumably unavailable for comment. After some time spent fruitlessly assaulting the ocean, a second command is given. Caligula, from his platform, declares a great victory. The ocean has been subdued. But every great victory requires spoils of war, a testament to the triumph. So the legionaries are now ordered to collect the plunder of their defeated foe. He commands you and your comrades to fill your helmets, to fill the folds of your tunics with seashells. And so you do. You, a hardened Roman soldier, who marched 1,000 miles for conquest and glory, are now meekly stooping to pick up whelks and cockles from the wet sand. The entire army is transformed into a reluctant army of beachcombers. It feels like a particularly bleak company team-building exercise, one where the CEO has clearly lost his mind. Your reward for conquering the god of the sea is a helmet full of damp, sandy shells. The baffling nature of this event has echoed down through history, and historians still argue whether this was a genuine act of lunacy or something else entirely. Our main sources for Caligula's reign, particularly the biographer Suetonius, were from the Roman senatorial class, a group that utterly despised him. They were eager to paint him as an insane, megalomaniacal monster. And the story of attacking the sea fits that narrative perfectly. It presents us with an emperor so divorced from reality that he literally believes he can wage war on an element of nature. This is the traditional view, and a wonderfully simple one. However, more recent interpretations offer a different, and perhaps more chilling, possibility. The story might not be about madness, but about power. Some historians suggest that the army was on the verge of mutiny. No, the legionaries, hearing terrifying tales of the wild Britons and the treacherous ocean currents, may have refused to board the ships. The battle against the sea in this light was not a hallucination. It was a calculated act of ritual humiliation. Caligula was mocking his soldiers' cowardice with a stunning piece of imperial sarcasm. "You're afraid of the water?" He might as well have said, "Fine, then the water shall be your enemy. Show me how brave you are against the waves. And since you refuse to take the treasures of Britain, you shall have the treasures of this beach instead." He was demonstrating the totality of his power, a power so absolute he could not only command them to die, but could command them to perform acts of profound, soul-crushing stupidity. Their plunder of worthless seashells becomes their punishment, a tangible symbol of their disgrace. However, more recent interpretations offer a different, and perhaps more chilling, possibility. The story might not be about madness, but about power. Some historians suggest that the army was on the verge of mutiny. The legionaries, hearing terrifying tales of the wild Britons and the treacherous ocean currents, may have refused to board the ships. The battle against the sea in this light was not a hallucination. It was a calculated act of ritual humiliation. Caligula was mocking his soldiers' cowardice with a stunning piece of imperial sarcasm. "You're afraid of the water?" he might as well have said. "Fine, then the water shall be your enemy. Show me how brave you are against the waves. And since you refuse to take the treasures of Britain, you shall have the treasures of this beach instead." He was demonstrating the totality of his power, a power so absolute he could not only command them to die, but could command them to perform acts of profound, soul-crushing stupidity. Their plunder of worthless seashells becomes their punishment, a tangible symbol of their disgrace. The bewildering, salty air of the Gallic coast gives way to the heavy, humid atmosphere of a Central European summer. You have leaped forward again in time, over 1700 years, an immense chasm of history. The Roman Empire, which seemed so eternal, has long since crumbled into dust and legend. You now find yourself in a different kind of army, one whose bright white uniforms stand out starkly against the deep greens of the surrounding woodlands. You are with the mighty Habsburg army, the multinational force of the Austrian Empire, and the year is Itzenchi by Bashabad. You are in the Banat region of what will one day be modern Romania, encamped near the town of Karansavis. Chuzher, the mission on paper is simple. You are part of a massive force, 100,000 strong, assembled to fight the armies of the Ottoman Empire. Your emperor, Joseph II, a man known as an enlightened despot, is here himself, radiating an aura of calm, rational authority. But the army he commands is a complicated, fragile thing. It is less a unified force and more a sprawling coalition held together by the Habsburg crown. The men in your regiment might speak German, while the soldiers in the camp next to you converse in Serbian, Polish, Croatian, or Hungarian. The officer class gives commands in German, but many of the foot soldiers barely understand them. It's a multicultural enterprise that is, on a good day, a marvel of imperial organization. On a bad day, it's a recipe for chaos. The ancient equivalent of assembling a piece of IKEA furniture, with instruction manuals in 6 different languages. Your company has been sent ahead of the main army to scout the area across the Timisos River. The evening is descending, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gray. The air is thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. After a day of marching, you and your comrades find no sign of the Turkish army. The area is quiet, peaceful. As your small detachment of hussars, light cavalrymen, is setting up camp, you encounter a group of local Vlach merchants traveling with a large wagon. This wagon contains several large casks of schnapps. A business transaction quickly ensues. The hussars, weary and thirsty, pool their money and purchase the potent liquor. The tension of the long day begins to melt away as the schnapps is passed around. The atmosphere becomes relaxed, jovial, but then a second group of Austrian soldiers, an infantry detachment, arrives on the scene. They too have been scouting. Seeing the hussars enjoying their spoils, they naturally ask for a share. The hussars, now well into their cups and feeling decidedly proprietary about their purchase, refuse. An argument breaks out. Voices are raised. Insults, likely in several different languages, are exchanged. The disagreement escalates from a drunken squabble into a full-blown brawl. Someone, in the heat of the moment, fires a shot. And in that instant, a single, stupid act of drunken possessiveness triggers a cascade of catastrophic blunders. Downstream in the main army camp, other soldiers hear the shot. In the darkness and confusion, a cry goes up. "Tursi, Tursi, the Turks, the Turks!" The cry spreads through the camp like wildfire, jumping from one nationality to another. A nervous officer, hearing the commotion and believing a Turkish attack is imminent, orders his artillery to open fire in the direction of the noise. First, you watch from your position across the river as your own army's cannon begin to pound the encampment where the hussars and infantry are brawling. The brawlers, suddenly under friendly artillery fire, scatter in panic. They run back towards the main army camp, trying to escape the shelling. As they splash across the river in the dark, The terrified soldiers in the main camp see them coming. They don't see their own comrades returning in a panic. They see what they expect to see, a mass of shadowy figures charging out of the night. It must be the Turkish cavalry. The panic intensifies. Officers, unable to see clearly what is happening, bellow contradictory commands. Entire regiments begin firing wildly into the darkness at the imagined enemy, who are, in fact, their own retreating scouts. A German-speaking officer might shout, "Halt! Stop!" A German-speaking officer might shout, "Halt! Stop!" But to a soldier who doesn't speak German, it might sound like Allah! A feared war cry of the Ottomans. The linguistic diversity of your army, once a symbol of imperial reach, has become an accelerant for chaos. Every unfamiliar shout is a confirmation of the enemy's presence. The situation devolves into pure, unadulterated madness. Entire sections of the army are now engaged in a ferocious firefight with other sections of the army. Cavalry squadrons charge into infantry formations. The camp becomes a hellscape of panic shouting, musket flashes, and the screams of men cut down by their own side. At the center of it all is the emperor himself. Joseph II, a ruler who prides himself on logic and order, is asleep in his tent. When the chaos erupts, he and his staff rush out, trying desperately to restore control. He rides into the fray, shouting at his men to cease firing, to recognize their comrades. In the darkness and confusion, a group of his own soldiers mistakes his entourage for a band of Turks. They open fire. The emperor's aides are scattered, and Joseph himself has his horse shot out from under him, escaping death or capture by mere inches, by leaping into a nearby ditch. The supreme commander of the Habsburg army has been decisively unhorsed by his own terrified troops. The pandemonium rages for several hours. As dawn finally breaks, the pale morning light reveals a scene of utter devastation. The field is littered with the dead and wounded. Estimates of the casualties from this phantom battle are difficult to verify, but a mainstream historical fact is that the Austrian army suffered significant self-inflicted losses. Modern estimates are often more conservative than the wildly exaggerated claims of up to casualties that circulated later, but even a few hundred dead or wounded is a staggering blunder. For an army that has not yet even met the enemy, the whole sad, ridiculous affair of the Battle of Karansebes is itself a matter of some scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the event truly happened with the dramatic intensity that later accounts suggest, or if a smaller, more contained friendly fire incident was wildly embellished over time. The primary sources are sparse and some date from decades after the fact, a red flag for historians. Yet, the story has persisted, a legendary testament to military incompetence. It is, perhaps, the ultimate historical cautionary tale about the dangers of alcohol at work, mixed with a healthy dose of poor communication. 2 days later, the real Ottoman army arrives. They approach the town of Karansebes expecting to face a prepared force of 100,000 men. Instead, they find a disheveled, demoralized army that has already managed to bloody itself into a state of near collapse. They discover dead Austrian soldiers, wounded men, abandoned equipment, and a camp that looks like it has already lost a major battle. They take the town with ease. The Habsburg army had succeeded in doing the Ottomans' job for them, the Gospi Porsley, a truly spectacular own goal on the military stage. You are left in the wreckage, a witness to a battle that was lost before the enemy even arrived, all for the want of a shared bottle of schnapps. The chaotic, damp fields of Karansebes dissolve, the ghost sounds of an army defeating itself, fading into a quiet stillness. The air grows colder, sharper, laced with the salty tang of the sea, but different from the Gallic coast. This is a bleaker, more rugged landscape. You find yourself sitting atop a horse. The creak of leather and the warm, living presence of the animal beneath you a familiar comfort. You are in the Crimea, a peninsula jutting into the Black Sea. The year is 1866, You are a trooper in the British Army, part of an expeditionary force fighting alongside the French and the Ottoman Empire against the Russians. Your uniform is magnificent, a splash of brilliant scarlet and gold in the drab, autumnal landscape of rolling hills and wide, open valleys. It is also, you have come to realize, magnificently impractical for a modern war. You feel a strange sense of detachment, a feeling shared by many in your ranks. This is a new kind of war, one of rifle muskets and powerful new artillery, but it is being conducted by generals who still seem to be dreaming of the Napoleonic Wars. The Battle of Balaclava is raging around you, but for your specific unit, the cavalry, it has been a day of frustrating inaction. You watch from a distance as the infantry, the thin red line of the Julsersand Highlanders, famously repels a Russian cavalry charge. You watch as the Heavy Brigade, your sister formation, conducts its own successful, glorious charge uphill against a superior force. You and your comrades in the Light Brigade, the fast, dashing scouts of the army, simply sit and wait. Your command structure is a uniquely British tangle of aristocratic privilege and personal animosity. The overall commander of the British forces, Lord Raglan, directs the battle from a high vantage point on the Sapune Heights, giving him a panoramic view of the battlefield. The commander of your cavalry division, the Earl of Lucan, is positioned down in the valley. The commander of your own light brigade, the Earl of Cardigan, is stationed at the head of your regiments. This chain of command should be simple. It is not. Lucan and Cardigan are brothers-in-law, and they despise each other with a passion that is legendary throughout the army. This isn't just a workplace rivalry. It's a family feud playing out with live ammunition. From his lofty perch, Lord Raglan sees a worrying development. The Russians, having been repulsed elsewhere, are beginning to drag away the British naval guns they had captured. Earlier, from a series of small fortifications called redoubts on the Causeway Heights. He cannot allow this. He quickly dictates an order to one of his aides-de-camp, a fiery and intelligent young officer named Captain Louis Nolan. The order is for the cavalry to advance rapidly to the front to prevent the enemy carrying away the guns. He wants the light brigade to move up the heights and harass the Russian artillery crews. To Raglan, from his high vantage point, the objective is perfectly clear. Captain Nolan gallops down into the valley to deliver the handwritten order to Lord Lucan. And here, in this simple transfer of information, the catastrophic blunder is born. Lord Lucan, from his position down on the valley floor, cannot see the specific guns on the heights that Raglan is referring to. The terrain blocks his view. From his perspective, the only Russian guns visible are a massive, prepared artillery battery at the very far end of the long North Valley. A mile and a half away, Lucan reads the vague order and is bewildered. It seems to demand a frontal assault on an entrenched and lethally prepared artillery position. He asks Nolan for clarification. Attack, sir, attack what? What guns? Captain Nolan, perhaps impatient, perhaps contemptuous of Lucan's caution, is said to have made a fateful gesture. And he flings his arm out, not precisely toward the redoubts on the heights, but more generally in the direction of the end of the valley. "There is your enemy," he exclaims. "There are your guns, my lord." It is a death sentence, delivered with a dramatic flourish, and historians still argue whether the tragic misinterpretation was the fault of Raglan's imprecise order, Lucan's rigid refusal to use his own initiative, or Nolan's fatally insubordinate and unclear gesture. The blame has been shifted between the three men for more than a century and a half. Lucan, though he knows the order is insane, believes he must obey. He trots over to the Earl of Cardigan. He relays the command. Cardigan, upon hearing that he is to lead his Linbite Tirers horsemen on a suicidal charge down a valley, lined with Russian cannons on both sides and with a full battery at the end, is aghast. He points out the obvious flaw in the plan. But Lucan replies coolly, "I know it. but Lord Raglan will have it so. We have no choice but to obey. The personal hatred between the two men hangs thick in the air. There is no collaboration, no discussion, just the resentful transfer of a fatal order, and so you get the command. Sabers are drawn, their polished steel flashing in the pale light. Cardigan positions himself at the front, a lone, immaculate figure. He gives the order to advance. The brigade moves off, a river of red, blue, and gold, first at a walk, then a trot. The sheer spectacle is breathtaking. It is perfect parade ground discipline, a vision of glorious romantic warfare. And the world explodes. The Russians on the Fedyukin Heights to your left, and on the Causeway Heights to your right, open fire. A crossfire of artillery and rifle muskets. Tears into your magnificent, perfect line. Shells burst overhead, men and horses scream and tumble to the earth, creating terrible gaps in the formation. But you ride on, closing ranks, galloping now through a valley of death as the poet Alfred, Lord Tennyson, would later immortalize it. There is nothing to do but ride forward, into the mouths of the guns. You reach the Russian battery at the end of the valley, a tattered, bleeding remnant of a brigade. There is a brief, frantic moment of fighting as you and the other survivors slash at the Russian gunners. But it is futile. You are too few. And now you must turn and ride back. The journey back is a desperate, chaotic scramble through the same terrible gauntlet of fire. As the shattered remains of the Light Brigade make their way back to the British lines, the true scale of the blunder is revealed. Nearly half your number are killed, wounded, or captured. Your beautiful, proud brigade has been effectively destroyed in 20 minutes of glorious, pointless courage. A quirky and poignant tidbit of the event's aftermath involves Lord Cardigan himself. Having led the charge all the way to the Russian guns, he simply turned around and trotted back, largely unhurt. Later that evening, he went back to his personal yacht, anchored in Balaclava Harbor, to eat a fine dinner and drink a bottle of champagne, apparently feeling he had done his duty for the day. This act, more than anything, highlighted the vast, almost unimaginable chasm between the aristocratic officer class and the men they commanded. The great blunders of history, you reflect, have so many different fathers. There is the arrogance of Crassus, buying a war his greed could not win. There is the absolute power of Caligula, waging war on the sea itself to prove a point. You've witnessed the utter confusion of the Austrian army at Karansibes, defeated by a drunken argument and a language barrier. And now you have ridden in a charge born of a different kind of confusion. A lethal cocktail of vague orders, personal hatred, and rigid, unquestioning obedience. It seems that for all the strategy, the technology, and the courage, history's battlefields are often commanded by something far more mundane and far more powerful, stupidity itself. And there is nothing more terrifying than the sight of brave men forced to pay the ultimate price for the foolishness of their commanders. Lalian,